Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, February 13th meeting of the Evanston Plan Commission. Tonight we have 3 items on the agenda, but I believe the first thing to do is to call the roll.
All right. Commissioner Draper?
Here.
Commissioner Dubin?
Here.
Commissioner Goddard?
Here.
Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Isaac? Commissioner Pagotzi? And Chair Lewis?
Here. I believe that means we have a quorum.
Yes.
All right, very good. So the second item is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of January 9th, 2019. Are there any comments, corrections, amendments? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
I believe that's Pagozzi, seconded
Oh.
Goddard. How's that? All right, so voice vote. All in favor? Aye. All against? All right, the minutes are approved as presented. A few things today. We do have 3 items on the agenda. The first one is more of a housekeeping item. It's a text amendment for ground floor uses in the Central Overlay District. If no one is here to speak to that in the public, is there anyone? All right, if that being the case, if there's no objections from the commissioners, I would like to move that down to the bottom of the agenda, so to be respectful of other people's time. All right, so a few things. The Plan Commission is a recommending body. I think you should be aware. Our mission is to gather facts and make a recommendation to the City Council. We do not approve or disapprove anything. If you're going to speak tonight, I ask that you have signed up, first of all, on the sign-up sheet. Anyone who wants to speak has not signed up? All right, why don't you please sign up? So, and then when you come to speak, please come to the podium and state your name and your address for the record, and speak clearly into the microphone. And if you're going to speak, I'd like to ask you all to swear that you're telling the truth. So, can I get everyone to raise their right hand and swear that you're going to tell the truth? Say, I do, I will. All right, very good. Thank you. All right. So, where are we? So we're on to the first case, right? To the second one. All right. So we are going to hear now item 18 PLND 0085, a planned development at 2425 Oakton Street. The first thing that we'll do is we'll let the petitioner present their case. Well, staff will make a first an introduction, then the petitioner will present their case, and then we'll open it up to questions from the commissioners and then the public. And after that, then we'll go to public comment. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes, so please be brief. And if you have the same comments as the person before you on the it would be great to just say, I agree with the person who just presented in front of me, instead of going over the same ground. All right, so can you please start, Ms. Jones?
Sure. Okay, I'm going to provide a very brief overview before we let the applicant provide some more details. The property that we are going to be looking at today is on the western edge of the city, near McCormick, just north of Oakton. The applicant is requesting approval of a planned development, which includes one site development allowance for a canopy, which is set back from the principal structure at a distance less than 10 feet. Quick characteristics. The actual property size is 47,679 square feet, or just over 1 acre. The building size, which is the actual car wash facility itself, is 4,900 square feet. There are a total of 24 parking spaces, which includes 20 spaces that are set for vacuum spaces, in addition to 25 stacking spaces for vehicles that are in a queue to go through the car wash itself. The actual requirement for parking is only 7 stacking spaces. And the height of the actual building is a taller one-story at 29.5 feet. This is a general site plan for that particular property. The ingress and egress, I will note, is right in and right out only. Customers will come in on the east end of the property, which is on the top of the page. They will either get into the stacking line for the queue to go to the car wash facility, or go to the left to go to the vacuum spaces. The queue for the actual car wash facility travels on the perimeter of the lot, going north and then coming back south to the western portion of the lot where the actual building is. As I mentioned before, there are 20 vacuum spaces in 2 separate lanes that are going to be under canopies. There's also a bypass lane in case, for whatever reason, customers need to leave the line, or in the case for garbage pickup, they can access the trash enclosure, which is located on the north end of that property. And I'll let the applicant explain a little bit more about the site. As I mentioned before, there is only one site development allowance that's being requested, and that is for an accessory structure that is less than 10 feet from the principal structure. As stated, the requirement is to have at least 10 feet between a principal structure and an accessory structure. This is not an item where there are additional incentives or anything for a site development allowance. And as proposed, there is a 3 feet distance between the canopy and the building. There's a public benefit that is proposed, and the applicant has committed to providing assistance with improving a CTA bus stop within the vicinity of the site. And staff will continue to work with the applicant on determining which bus stop that will be and obtaining a cost estimate for those improvements. So, all that being said, staff recommends that the Plan Commission make a positive recommendation for approval of the special use for plan development, subject to the following conditions: that the proposed plan development be substantially conform to the plans and documents presented, that the applicant agree to a construction management plan prior to building permit issuance, that any change in the use of the building be approved as an amendment to the plan development, that the applicant is responsible for the relocation of existing traffic signals and coordinating the signal timing, that the applicant shall provide a one-time contribution to be used for improvements to a CTA bus stop in the vicinity of the proposed development, and finally, that the applicant agrees to contract with a traffic consultant to study circulation patterns and make necessary revisions to the site plan or access points if the city identifies traffic issues with the development at any time in the future. And I won't go into details on the standards that are for approval, but very briefly, the project must meet Section 63510, Standards for Special Uses, Section 6369, Standards for Plan Developments, and Section 614.110, Standards and Guidelines for Plan Developments in the I-1 Industrial and Office District. So with that, I will open it up to you.
All right, thank you very much. Who will be presenting for the petitioner?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Daniel. I'm with Daniel Law Office. Jeff Miller from Watermark Engineering Resources is here as well. The two of us will handle the presentation. I'll handle most of it. George Simoulis, the project architect, is the third individual that took an oath. I have business cards so that you have a record of our contact information. I'm an attorney that's practiced land use and land development for some time. I've represented municipalities as corporate counsel and special counsel in zoning litigation. I've testified in probably well over 200 of these hearings in the past. I have known the folks behind HPCW for the last 3 years, working on various projects in the north and western suburbs. As far as this development's concerned, there are a handful of things that I'd like to touch on. Let's see if we can, maybe that was the wrong one. As far as location goes, when it comes to your standards, I think all of you are familiar with this stretch of Oakton. It is the west end of Oakton. It is in a rather busy part of town. You've got a lot of big box retail north and northeast of the site. You've got fast food to the direct east, gas station, the sports dome, and a food store southwest of the site. As you move further east down Oakton Avenue, Oakton tapers off to two-lane road, one in each direction. I think the most significant aspect of this project we'll get into is the right-in, right-out. That was a significant give on the part of the developer in this particular instance. The car wash, you'll note, tends to create some concern for noise. We submitted a noise study for a car wash that was within a couple hundred feet of residential. When you take a look at this area, you've got to go thousands of feet to find the R2 district that is adjacent to this I-1 ORD district. If you see the I-1 there along Oakton at the west end there, that's where the property is situated, on the southwest corner of the I-1 district. It is an ORD district, so car washes are permitted as of right in the district, subject to compliance with the planning and development standards. With respect to the intersection, you've got traffic entering Oakton from the south. The left turn and right turn will remain available. You'll also have the opportunity to go straight into the development site. One thing I would like to point out in this slide is the taper for the business to the east of the subject property. If you take a look towards the southeast corner of our site, you can see that there's the Philip Lockman building directly east of our site. There's a taper on our property with an apron that allows trucks to back into the Philip Lockman loading area without making multiple movements on Oakton. That happens about twice a month. All right, and in talking with the folks at Philip Lockman, they've been around for a while. They're really not going anywhere anytime soon, but we have agreed to preserve that taper for the benefit. Thank you. So the taper is situated right there at the southeast corner of our project site. All right. But we've agreed to phase our final landscaping and site development as far as fencing is concerned to preserve that taper until they redevelop or no longer need their loading zone. And you'll see that in our plan coming up. That's a picture of the type of truck that backs in. It took us some time to find it because it certainly doesn't happen every week at this location, but you can see that if that truck is going to back into the site, it will pull forward ahead of that entrance headed westbound and make a backing movement to get in there. So the taper generally runs along the angle of that fence that's angled. It actually crosses our property. We're going to allow that pursuant to a license. Here you can see the Phase 1 apron plan. You can see how we're preserving that for Philip Lockman and the benefit of Oakton Street traffic. With respect to the elevations of the building, we've got a couple things to comment on. There is a request for an allowance to let the west canopy sit within 3 feet of the building. We can attach it. Okay, there's the building face to the upper side of this slide. And when you take a look at the lower left part of this slide, you can see the canopy. Now, these canopies in 80-90% of the cases are not connected to buildings, and there's a reason for that. Wind load and everything else comes into play when you're dealing with building designs and canopies. And the preference, the strong preference, design-wise and from an ownership perspective, is to avoid that connection where possible and reasonable. So we are asking for that site development allowance. With respect to landscaping on the site, it is what you would expect to see under Evanston's planning standards. The perimeter is heavily landscaped where it's visible from the public right-of-way. You'll note that the north side of the property is to the left of this slide. You see landscaping between the right-in and the right-out. You see landscaping on the southwest corner to the lower right of this slide, and then you see your perimeter landscaping. What you're looking at now is what would occur on the on the east side of the property, which is the top of the slide, when Philip Lockman no longer needs that apron. Okay, so this is what, quote-unquote, would be the Phase 2 condition on that east side, the southeast side of the property. Our detention is situated to the north in the triangular area that extends north. Directly east of that detention area is a detention basin for the commercial area to the northeast of the property. You'll note in this landscape plan, sometimes it's easier to work off landscape plans from a visual perspective, but the car wash is aligned from north to south. And that is the most convenient way from a couple of perspectives. Obviously, the site accommodates it well. The site directly to our west is a mix of outdoor storage and contractor-type yards. You've got Ozinga a little bit further to the north, and I think the building fits along the west side of the lot line, or the west side of the lot, a lot better than it would somewhere else in the property. When it comes to stacking, you can see we've placed the pay stations. Let's see here. The pay stations are deep into the property. There are 2 of them. And you can stack plenty of vehicles from the pay stations to the entrance. To the extent that pay stations are busy and someone decides, well, you know what? Maybe I won't go through the car wash first, I'll vacuum first. They can pull into vacuum, and there's a one-way recirculation route protected here with a crosswalk and a stop sign before you can re-enter the area for the pay stations. So you're not going to have a jam up. This is a membership type car wash, meaning that you and I can buy memberships and have pass cards so that we can use the car wash any given day during the month without having to pay and repay. It's a membership situation. You can also go in there for single use if you're not a member. That helps with convenience. With respect to parking, we've got 3 employee parking spaces and 1 accessible stall. Okay. We're not necessarily required to have that parking. You'll have 1 employee on site at all times, 2 or 3 or 4 when it's busy. We don't expect to have more than 3 employees most of the time. If it's busy or we have an issue where we have to do extra cleanup and empty trash more regularly, we'll get another employee there. We also have an accessible vacuum space. That's something that you don't see in a lot of these car washes, so that's special for this project. If you go out west, if you go to some of the near suburbs closer to O'Hare, these car washes do not have that accessible vacuum stall, so that's another benefit. We do have discussion ongoing about the bike rack and where the bike rack would be situated. In this plan, the bike rack was situated next to this accessible stall. Staff and DAPR have asked us to consider relocating that or ensuring it's protected by curb or bollards of some sort, and we're working on that now. At present, we have a plan showing it closer to the sidewalk in an area that's more visible to the public way, which is one of the comments that DAPR had. Of course, that's something that we're working on in the design phase. The car wash itself is an environmental benefit to the city of Evanston. If I were to wash my car in the yard with the hose running, scrub it myself, I'm going to use a heck of a lot more water than 22 gallons, which is our efficiency gallonage per vehicle. If we slow down, we're slightly over 30 gallons. Because of the 30-gallon usage per vehicle, we're required to have recycling. So we will be recycling at this location. I think that was something that was brought up not just at some of the ward meetings. We've been to 2 but also at Dapper. So we will be proceeding with a recycling plant inside the car wash so that we're recycling the water that we do use. We are, from a landscaping perspective, before I move on to the next plan, there is a plan there for the Monarch Pledge. So I think if there are any questions, you can feel free to interrupt me. But one point here on the traffic movements, okay? Some people are concerned if the car wash exits directly onto the right-of-way, that you're going to have a situation where there's water dripping off, and in the winter months, you're going to have some ice buildup. Okay, we have a drip control as you exit the car wash. You're going to have 2 turn movements before a vehicle can actually enter the Oakton right-of-way. And that should serve to substantially reduce any concern over water collecting on Oakton or drips leading to some ice buildup. So that's another benefit of this particular design. There's another diagram. I zoomed into the landscape plan at this location to show you what would happen if we went directly to Phase 2 and built the black metal fence to the full extent and landscaped. You see on the Philip Lockman site, which is to the upper part of this slide, there's a bump out. That's a loading dock that enters into a door, but it's an elevated dock. They wouldn't have enough room to back in. Another view showing the traffic from the south. You'd have a through opportunity from the south. You'd have your right and left opportunity. And again, no left turn into the site. Okay? This plan does show the phasing. The overall site development plan, again, you've got here from a neighborhood perspective, you've got restricted access at the Shell across the street. They do have the benefit of a left turn in or out if you use the intersection. We're not going to have that same benefit because Evanston wants to keep traffic on Oakton moving. We will have that look-back traffic analysis done, but when you take a look at the effort to limit access, you're going to handle it by signage, you're going to handle it by taking cars efficiently into the site with 3 options, 2 of them being pay stations that stack plenty of cars and 1 for vacuums. All right, and if anyone decides it's too busy for them or they have an emergency, they can exit easily out of the site via that westerly through lane. Again, you can see that there are, from the pay station back, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 vehicles that you can fit in there. Another shot of the elevations. And this is our site development allowance that we're asking you to consider. All right? We are able to connect the west canopy. Okay, again, it is our strong preference not to. It is our structural engineer's preference not to, our architect's preference not to. But if we were to connect it, this would be your connection. All right, the difference between this view and the view that I showed you earlier with no connection is minimal. There's really no benefit to the city in requiring that connection that you see in this slide here. Okay, from an architectural and structural engineering perspective, we prefer to avoid it. With respect to power lines and everything else, it'll be underground from the main feed into the building. There is a significant power line heading across the property at roughly center, and we're going to be spending a good deal of money relocating a power line that runs roughly at this location here. We'll also be responsible for handling the intersection and making sure the timing's right. From a standards perspective, I think all of you are very familiar with the standards. What we're dealing with here is a use that is planned as of right in the ORD district. The use is consistent with the legislation in the city of Evanston as far as the concern for surrounding landowners. From a noise perspective, there's nobody in the area that would be impacted. The car wash entrance and exit are aligned so that even if somebody were just off to the northeast or northwest, so they're not going to be able to hear that car wash. From a traffic perspective, KLOA has studied it. We submitted not just a traffic update or traffic report from KLOA, but we submitted the Sport Dome traffic study along with our application, and KLOA hasn't seen anything inconsistent with that. KLOA thought that we could look at the left turn-in issue down the road and recommended that we consider doing that. It's kind of flipped around. We're going with right in, right out, with a look back to make sure what we're doing here works, not to look at a left-in opportunity. But I think from a traffic perspective, you're looking at a car wash that serves ambient traffic, meaning it's already in the area. It's a convenience for not just residents, but for people that are employed in the hospital district to the east. People that are coming to the Sports Dome, they'll be able to use the car wash to the extent that the car wash has met environmental demands of staff and of the city. We've gone through a long process to make sure that where we can, we're providing a bit extra so that there's that benefit to the city. From a valuation perspective, you know, if you think about this property, it's on Oakton Avenue at the west end of town. You already have some core drivers in the area. Along Oakton Avenue on a parcel such as this, you're not going to get a significant operation that employs 20 or 30 people. It's just not going to happen, and you're not going to get somebody who's interested in restaurant service or retail from a perspective of selling goods, because you are going to have that restricted access, whether it's a car wash or some other use. That's just the nature of Oakton Street. So with that, I suppose I'll be available for questions from folks that are in attendance, from the commission. We're happy to be here. I think it's been a privilege to work with Megan and Scott on this. We've had some disagreements from time to time, but after the review, and it's been a detailed review, I think you've got a great project in front of you that deserves a positive recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel.
Thank you.
All right, so I would like to see if there's any questions from the commissioners first. Commissioner Halleck.
I have a few questions, actually pretty much all related to traffic. You talk about relocating the traffic light. Where would that be relocated to?
The traffic signal post
Right there.
is right there, and there's one right there. And so the idea is that that post, or both these posts, would be combined into more of a mast arm configuration than individual posts. So that coming from the east, there would be a mast arm, or south, excuse me, coming from the south, there would be a mast arm across this intersection like you have on the eastbound leg to direct the traffic coming from the south.
So just to tie into that, where's the stop, is the stop line in the same spot, or is it?
And nothing would change for eastbound or westbound. That stop bar would be in the same location, including northbound on the south leg.
And has KOLA looked at this?
Yes.
And that's not a conflict with your incoming lane?
No, the KLOA was involved in the original design of this intersection from when it went in, and they put together a report that addresses exactly what we're proposing.
Okay. And you said that KOLA they thought it was a good idea to have a left turn in, going east, and then...
We thought it was a great idea. KLOA hedged, and we asked them to try to defend that left turn in, and ultimately it boils down to not having a left turn in.
How do you
KLOA
prevent that?
Well, you've got signage, and if that signage does not work, if the signage does not work to prevent that left turn in, we're working with the city on something else, including a possible pork chop or something to that effect. The dilemma with a pork chop is you've got to pay attention to other vehicles and their access to the property. So we look at the garbage plan and we look at the truck access, that kind of routine. But there are ways that you can physically do it if you need to do it. We'd
Okay.
like to work with the sign, but if there's a problem, the city has the right to call us back in and say, get KOA on this, have them go out, observe it, and, you know, we think that there's an issue with excessive left turns in, people breaking the law, see what you can do about it.
Yeah, because I could see it could be a mess there.
And that's a perpetual issue. There's no sunset on the look back for traffic.
Yeah. And my other question has to do with actually your site plan. When you come out of the wash, you have to make like a double, kind of a double S turn and then position to go right. Just looking at it, it seems difficult, but I could be wrong.
The purpose of that was really to have the movements to slow traffic. There are two things at issue here. If you take a look at that sidewalk, the ADA route from the sidewalk to the car wash, the best location for that is where you see the pointer now. You don't want to put that ADA route near the entrance where people who are paying attention to Oakton traffic are now having to look for somebody who's on an ADA route. This is the most protected location because of the pace of the vehicles exiting the car wash. We think that by keeping that exit where it is, it keeps that ADA route protected.
But just car movement going around and then turning around again, it just seems awkward. But
It is slightly awkward, but there's also two other benefits, is it gives us more stacking before we get out onto Ogden. And as well as, what did I say, Ogden? Oakton.
Oakton,
And also it has more time for the drip in the watershed on the car before it gets to the road.
yeah.
Everything drains to the west.
Right. Has KOLA specifically looked at this, the site plan?
They looked at the entire plan. I think the traffic plan was more related to Oakton Avenue, or Oakton Street
Yeah.
traffic volume and our stacking than it was the exiting traffic in that movement. But it's not out of the ordinary to
It
see.
just looks
multiple
very
turns.
awkward to me and hard to do. That's.
Any more questions? All right. Commissioner Goddard?
Can you tell this non-engineer, non-architect why you prefer not to connect that canopy to the building?
Generally, it's a matter of wind loads, and if you do have a high wind event, you know, even at 35 miles an hour, you put pressure on the masonry components of the building. It adds to the maintenance expense of the building. But it is primarily a wind load concern. Another issue that we've got is that that canopy needs to remain unenclosed because of access to the vacuums and how we handle property maintenance, so you wouldn't have a wall on either end. So that connection is literally just a continuation of a roof, and I think it adds very little to the development to have that connection via the roof that I showed you previously, where it's simply the flashing that runs from the roof line down. It may actually add more of an appearance of mass.
Any other questions? So I have two. One, the power line, is that there's a public utility? Is there an easement that has to be adjusted as part of that?
There is an easement. I don't believe the easement has to be adjusted. I think it's a pretty broad easement, but to the extent that we're working with ComEd, they don't have any problem, and we won't have a problem adjusting the easement if we have to.
Okay.
It's a regional power line that we cannot relocate too much because it serves, two cities. And,
Sure.
yeah.
And I guess the other one is more just curiosity. How does water recycling work in this? Does it involve tanks or storage? Or
It does. It involves collection, and it involves a tank that runs alongside the car wash conveyor. So the tank actually stores the water, it filters it, cleanses it, and places the water back into the car wash system.
And then it's released slowly after so many cycles into the stormwater system, or?
Right, we would meet all the MWRD requirements and environmental standards for that.
Okay, all right. All right, so if there's no more questions from the commissioners, I would like to open this up to questions from the public. Now, we have two people signed up to speak. This is questions of the petitioner. Does Michael, and excuse me, I'm probably going to not say your name correctly, Bonaguro? Would you like to, are you?
I mean, I would like to address, but at the moment, I don't have any.
No questions, okay, that's fine. You'll have an opportunity to make a statement. All right, and then Dilshad Lakhami?
Yes, same.
Same? Okay, all right, very good. So you don't have to respond to that, so I guess we... Since that moves so quickly, I think we can move right into public testimony. So let's do it in the same order. Mr. Bonaguro, would you like to make a statement?
Good evening. My name is Michael Bonaguro. I'm a resident of Evanston, and I'm also an attorney. And I'm here, and I represent Dilshad and Minhaj Lakhami, and they own the Shell station, which is located at 2494, directly across the subject of which we're here discussing this evening, as well as the Subway and the Dunkin' Donuts. I believe Ms. Dilshad just wants a minute when I'm finished, and then that'll be it for us. One of the biggest concerns is both a resident and a representative of my clients is that the city of Evanston has made a long-term commitment to something that hasn't been mentioned here at all this evening, and that's really to the parks. James Park I haven't seen it mentioned. I really didn't see it in the summary application that was submitted to you all. One of the biggest concerns here is access to the parks. As you all know, there's single lane access to the parks at up east and west on Oakton Street. And given the fact that there are 9 baseball fields, 2 opposing teams at every single game, there's also soccer fields, tennis courts, and AYSO, Team Evanston, so on and so forth. One of the most treasured assets that we have here in Evanston is James Park. It already is very difficult, if not impossible, at certain times of the day from 7 months from, let's say, April through November to have access toward the Levy Center and coming around and to even try to park. That's just a side note. And you also have the bubble, which again was briefly mentioned this evening. From a Friday through a Sunday, they have 2,000 to 3,000. I would like to see the studies on that, but they have 2,000 to 3,000 people coming in and out of that facility, which is the exact same intersection as we're discussing this evening as well. There's also the Gordon Food Store, again, my client's facility. And the other thing to mention is that there's some type of concession with a right in and right out. It's single lane going westbound on Oakton. A right in is going to cause, at this point, we go from single lane to 2 lanes. The right in is going to cause a delay in turning into the car wash, which will back up Oakton even more. The right out coming from the car wash, assuming there's multiple cars that need to get out of the car wash at any one time, are going to have to turn back onto Oakton. And I don't know if I can't tell if that's a part of the light situation or not on turning right. My point is that the chances of accidents and so forth greatly increase, as well as my client pointed out, the abuse of, if there's no access going left, you're going to see a lot of cars turning right, either into the Shell station or at the bubble there, just to turn around and go back east, or I'm sorry, to go back west. And so I think there should be some consideration that because there's access to the car wash, or I'm sorry, to the Shell station going eastbound, I think there's going to be a lot of potential abuse in terms of turning in the Shell station or turning right, just to turn around and perhaps go left back out to that gas station. And the last thing I'm going to mention is that, and this may not be a subject for this commission, but I don't really see the advantage, number one, the environmental benefit of a car wash. I see it as a great waste of a natural resource. But the second part is from my understanding and talking to my client, it's my understanding that the tax base that the city of Evanston receives is 4% from all the neighboring businesses. I question, and I don't know the answer other than what I've been informed of by my client, is that the gas station itself will not benefit the city of Evanston in terms of a tax base of that 4%. And I know that because in the back of the Shell station, there is, if you pay for gasoline, they give you a reduced rate, and you can go in and get a reduced, or you can get in and get a car wash. And my client tells me that when the cars go through his car wash, that there is no tax that goes to the city of Evanston of that. And I would ask that that be something you consider, although it's not part of this zoning area. And with that, what I'd like to do is just have my clients, Dilshad Lakimi, just say one thing. I think she's just going to be 1 minute. They've had their Shell station and Dunkin' Donuts there for approximately 10 years. And as anybody knows, that this is a highly congested area to begin with. And I think that the city of Evanston is looking for a lot of trouble, not only for these businesses that are paying a tax basis, but also the ingress and egress, no matter how you slice it with a right turn in and right turn out, for the literally thousands of people setting upon James Park at least 7-8 months out of the year. And with exception, I think that is something that we should preserve for the residents of the city of Evanston, as well as those people that are coming to play or to use our facility from other areas. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, please. Hi. And you can state your name and...
Okay. Good evening. My name is Dilshad Lakhani, and me and my husband Minhas are the owners of Evanston Shell and Car Wash for the last 10 years. We are here today to oppose this project because the corner of the proposed site is already congested, as my lawyer mentioned, and this project will make the corner a disaster and impact all the businesses around. People are going to avoid using that area, which will result in the loss of revenue for the Evanston. People are not going to shop around the proposed site because of the congestion and look for the alternatives that's in Skokie or in Lincolnwood. Mark explained the benefit of having the car wash in Evanston, but I think, to my knowledge, the car wash doesn't give any revenues to the city of Evanston, so there will be no revenues coming in. And I guess the city will not be happy to lose the revenue which our businesses bring in by serving all the other customers for other purposes, not just the car wash.
All right, thank you very much. So at this point, I think I give you the opportunity to respond to the points made.
Thank you, and I'll be brief on this. There are economic benefits to the city of Evanston. First of all, there's a service. Second of all, you do have folks that need their cars washed. And the fact of the matter is that the percentage of people washing cars at car washes like this rose above 50% recently because we all prefer that convenience and we don't want to waste the water. There is an environmental benefit. Now, I don't see that as a waste. I don't think they saw that the Lakshamis saw it as a waste when they opened their car wash. But as far as traffic's concerned, and I know it's important, I do want to correct the record on this. There are 4 lanes of Oakton Street along our property. It doesn't go to 2 lanes until you get east of our property. To the east of our property, you've got Philip Lockman Company. You've got Steak and Shake. You've got 2 entrances into Steak and Shake. You've got 2 entrances into the Home Depot. So it doesn't taper until you get well east of our property. On James Park, we touched on James Park in our narrative that we had submitted. I did not bring it up during testimony. As far as Oakton Street traffic is concerned, it's a corridor that's sensitive in Elmhurst, and if you have an ORD overlay district that intends to encourage development, the goal is to find development that is taking from the existing traffic, something that is of a convenience. If an individual is traveling eastbound on Oakton Street, all right, if I'm headed eastbound on Oakton Street and I cannot make that left turn, but I'm shopping, I want to grab a sandwich. I'm going to go to Home Depot first. I'll go to Steak and Shake first, and I'll hit the car wash on the way back on my westbound leg. If I'm on the east side, if I'm in most of Evanston and I'm headed west on Oakton Street, I'm going to hit the car wash before I make my return trip. It's a matter of familiarity. I cannot really speak to the illegal turns other than to say if people break the law, and we don't presume that they will during these processes, but if they do, the city has the ability to work out an engineered barrier of some sort that is more of a discouragement to that illegal turn movement and call us back, and that is perpetual. With respect to the stoplight, there was a hint of a question in Mr. Bonaguro's statement that they weren't sure if the right turn out had a connection with the stoplight. As far as the control itself, no. But we rely on gaps. And in any traffic analysis, you rely on gaps. You study the number of gaps and their frequency, and you want to make sure that ingress and egress from that right-of-way, Oakton Street, flows efficiently. And KLOA has concluded absolutely it does. Okay, so that traffic report supports that. They did not ignore the sports dome. KLOA reviewed the sports dome study that we had submitted. They reviewed the current numbers. We also went out, took pictures of that backing movement. And that backing movement, there are times during the day where that backing movement is easy to make into Philip Lockman, and it happens without obstructing traffic too much. I would hope that you consider a couple things here. There's only so much a property owner can do with Oakton Street. And this site has been underutilized, and it was in dilapidated condition before demolition. It was an old Salvation Army not-for-profit. It does need to be turned to something beneficial. You're not going to see retail there. So if the objection is on the basis of retail taxes, unless the state changes the law, you're not going to see a tax on car wash services, but you will have that benefit to people in the community. It will be a draw for some people to spend more time in the area where you have retail, and hopefully that is viewed as a secondary benefit when people do spend time at Steak and Shake or do spend time at Home Depot because, hey, they're getting their car washed, they may as well stop and get those picture hangers. You see what I'm saying? So it is a secondary benefit. It's a fruitful use of the property. It gets it back on the tax rolls. So thank you again.
All right. Thank you very much. Being pointed out that there is the option for persons or groups that have ownership interest in property within 1,000 feet of the property to ask for a continuance in writing. Is that correct? For the project. Is anyone requesting that? Yes, please. Can you please come to the microphone?
Can you reiterate, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand the continuance in writing.
So if you have, so the purpose of it is if you need time to gather further evidence or give other testimony, what is the exact word you say? There it is. Proper form. Purpose of presenting evidence or to rebut testimony given by the applicant. So if there's nothing substantial, then the request would be denied. So you would have to give good reason to present this and present it in writing to the.
Okay, so essentially we would need permission by this council to,
You would
For
have
the
to
request for
request a
okay, I understand.
continuance, giving good representation that you needed time to present further evidence
well,
or rebut testimony.
yeah, the only issue would be the study that is coming out of that south side intersection from the bubble, from the storage units that are back there, and that would be we would need to be able to talk to the owner of the bubble and understand, although I do have some understanding of it, of the lack of parking and so forth that's even back there, but for purpose of further congestion and the inability for even the cars that are going.
So you would do a study and present further evidence at the next meeting that this would be scheduled for in order to rebut the
The
petition.
traffic report that
Yeah,
has
the
been
traffic
submitted.
report, yes.
Right, the traffic report was submitted previously, correct?
Yes.
So, no,
you would present further evidence, factual evidence, not opinion, but factual evidence that would rebut the.
well, the factual evidence would be getting the exact numbers from the Quad Sport. in
It's
terms
a
of-
yes or no question. Would you be presenting, going through and gathering evidence and presenting factual evidence in rebuttal to a point, or gathering further evidence, and do you need time to do that?
I just wanted to let you know what it was that I was asking for. And as far as if I could have that time, I don't know when the next meeting is scheduled for, but I would like to be able to offer that information.
So you're requesting, you can write it down now and request it on behalf of your clients, that you need time to present, gather evidence, and
Did you
state
look at
what
the
it is.
traffic
Yes.
report that the
Have you-
petitioner
yeah.
submitted?
Yes.
I did look at, there was an awful lot of information to digest, and
Yeah, this is not to help you prepare, this is to give counter testimony.
Right.
So this is not something for you to buy time with, if you weren't prepared, right? So if you have something that definitively will help,
No, at this point, we are not looking for additional time to rebut the traffic report. But that was my initial concern.
please.
We want to continue for the next date, and we try to get more things. We're going to go around, and more evidence support us. So we like to continue the date.
All right, are you going,
He's
can you,
gonna write it, yeah.
can you do it? We have to take it now?
So
continuance in order to get any continuance?
Need something in writing.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's why it's.
Right,
giving
so
us
you have to write it, you have to write it down
At the date,
now,
yeah.
now do it, and
So,
request the continuance, and state the reason for the continuance.
And what evidence
sit down
you'll
and do that, or
present
do I-
to us
Yes.
next time.
Yes,
And what evidence you'll present to us
evidence you
next
seek to
time
present to us.
support your argument.
Okay.
yes.
okay.
I mean,
No, but now,
Yeah, yeah. we
I can't do anything until you write it down and give it to me. I can't make a
Okay.
motion, I can't do
Oh, I
anything.
see. So write it out the next.
Can I ask
the
a
next
question?
date available, but
Please.
from now.
What is the procedure for granting among us? Do we vote on whether there should be a continuance, or
No, if it's factual and based in,
then it's automatic?
it's granted, yes, they have the right, by right.
Gonna get,
Correct?
the
Matt,
numbers,
did you have a clean piece
Oh,
of
a
paper?
motion, so there would be a motion, so we would vote on this?
What's that?
Is Hugh,
Let me check the rules real quick.
okay.
I don't think that's, I mean, I don't,
It's the case. Pay attention, because I'm going to have to speak on it.
okay, well, if, there appears to be an objection to my request, so I don't want to, I mean, is it a matter of, is it just a matter of request and it's done, or?
No, there would be a motion, and it would be voted on by the, I believe, we're checking, legal, the
Okay.
legal is checking exactly whether or not it would be granted. Yeah, we would go for the date certain, which would be the next.
Since they
most
don't-
likely be the- Okay.
Since he doesn't know if they'll have any evidence, could we push this to P&D and let them present at that point?
Well, I'll have evidence, I mean, I'll have information, whether or not it's,
So, yeah.
you know,
okay.
No, you cannot tell us that you will have conflicting evidence to the traffic study, correct?
We're not conflicting the traffic evidence, but we want to gather more evidence, which is, object this project.
Which, no,
So-
for what purpose are you
Gather
what
the-
specifically?
A few people in the area, the other business people, they told me they are out of town, so we want to bring them.
But having them complain isn't the same thing
Yeah.
as presenting evidence.
Right.
Which is what you're supposed to
Yeah.
ask for.
Yes,
That
exactly.
You're supposed to present to us in the next meeting.
Chairman Lewis, I
Yes.
think the key is that they have to identify something that they are going to rebut. They don't
Exactly.
actually have to tell you what the evidence is at this point.
Yes.
But they need to identify something in the case that they intend to rebut. And looking at the rules, if the continuance is in the proper form, there does not appear to be a vote.
There does not appear to be a vote. If it's in proper form, it's granted to a date certain,
Well, until the next hearing.
to the next hearing. Okay. So you're going, can you present what exactly you're going to be disputing?
well,
Not getting other opinions and having other testimony, but
what we're disputing is the traffic coming from the south onto Oakton Street relative to what has been presented. That's what we're disputing. And as far as the exact evidence goes, it's my understanding from what was just read to you all is that that is a matter of what we will be presenting next time and does not need to be presented at this time.
Commissioner Pagozzi.
Yeah, I have a question. Was there something unusual about this petitioner's timing? Was the information that was presented not normally available?
I think that's a question for staff.
Yeah.
Was there public notice given?
The item was properly noticed by newspaper notice, and then also by mailing within a 1,000-foot radius of the site, and then a sign on the site as well, as typical for plan development applications.
Okay.
And the traffic study was available in that?
The traffic study was included in the packet. Packet was published, I believe, on Friday.
And the mailing that went out also included the information that's presented at this particular meeting. The traffic study and all of the attachments are on the city's website as well. So that information was available and
Okay.
has been available since the submission of the plan development application.
Thanks.
So- Right, and so you're going to present a new traffic study that would dispute the facts of the previous two presented traffic studies, the one from the Dome, which addressed the northbound traffic, and the subsequent one for the development.
That is, I mean, without telling you exactly, that's the way that this is going, yes. That's the evidence that we would like to present. And I understand that information was out there, but, when he's presenting it here tonight, I don't understand the basis for the rebuttal unless there's going to be an allowance of a rebuttal, regardless of whether or not what information was disclosed prior to this evening. But if you have the ability to, deny the request, then that's
Well-
the way it is. But
Well, so you're going to make a motion in writing to request a continuance to present evidence based on X.
that's correct.
So, do we have any, what are our choices?
Well, he
Mr.
first needs to present the request in writing. We can, once the request is submitted, I think we would probably have a better basis to make your decision. This really isn't a back and forth. This is,
Yeah.
once he submits it, we need to evaluate it and then make a decision from there.
But the process is not to make a motion, it's a chair decision.
The rule says the meeting shall be continued. It's not giving
Okay,
much.
so it's not a decision, it's a.
Right, I think, and I misspoke earlier saying it is the next meeting. It can be as early as the next meeting is obviously a date certain at your
Okay.
leisure.
Okay, so,
We can do another topic.
The key is that it actually has to rebut a point that was made
Yes.
tonight.
Yes.
It's not, you're correct that it's not opinion testimony. It's another traffic study. It's something to that nature.
okay, so you have to factually come up with evidence and be willing to pay for or, expert.
Yeah, we gotta do another traffic study from the different company.
Okay, so are you going to make your submission? You can just
Yes.
write it out by hand right now.
Just while we're waiting for that, just for the benefit of the folks in the audience and commissioners, and this is something that has occurred in the past with plan developments. There has been a continuance. It is in both the zoning ordinance 63611B as well as with the plan commission rules, as council has stated.
And the next scheduled board meeting is for March,
It's March 13th, but if members of the commission are available on a different date, at an earlier date, we can schedule something then and see if everyone is available.
well, so again, it's to a date certain, or, so the date certain without doing a poll survey here is March 13th, correct?
Correct.
Commissioner Pagozzi?
I'm a little confused. Is it normal procedure to basically solicit someone who may or may not oppose a given solicitor to tell them, hey, if you want to delay this and come back with further evidence, write something down and submit it. I feel uncomfortable with the way this is being
Yes.
rolled
I
out.
do too, yes.
Right. And just for the commission's benefit, everyone's benefit, it is within the Plan Commission's rules regarding requests for continuance that at the close of petitioner's case, the chair shall inform those present of the following, and then goes on, those with the ownership interest.
So
it is
we're
something
normal
that,
procedure
to the chair to bring it
So
up.
I am required,
Correct.
that's what Mr. Mangum had pointed out to me, so I had to make the notice.
Right. If those rules want to be changed in the future, that's, a future discussion for the commission.
Understood.
Okay.
I don't really, there's no ability to close the public comment until I have this. We're at the end of public comment. I don't believe I can go to the next agenda item without closing comment.
I just ask while he's filling out the form, assuming that it meets the standard of saying this is what they're going to present, I assume the public hearing remains open until, on the issue presented, until the next date certain, which seems to be the 13th. When that report's submitted, the ex parte rules kick in, so it gets sent to us at the same time. I figure I'll take a picture of it, so I've got a record of it before he hands it to you. We'll sort that out. But that's the process going forward, right? This issue is the issue coming back, but not...
Correct. There's been public comment, everyone who is, yes. So, correct? Yeah. Okay. You didn't expect to have such an exciting day, did you?
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Glad to help.
It's a figure study.
And it's fine that Mr. Daniels takes a picture of the petition as presented.
Yeah, yes, it's all public
It's all
record.
public anyway, so just checking.
Just trying to save the administration.
Yep. Okay. This is it? Yeah. It's okay. You can,
What?
One and cube.
Cube? Cube mark.
Spelling and grammar can be close enough, I guess. Well,
Chairman Lewis, just to make sure everybody's aware, there's only one continuance that can be granted under this section.
okay. That's the good news. Yes, seriously. Yes, yes. Can you, this is just a request. All right. Thank you very much. I believe that fills the bill.
Sure, and it's the property owners, their names at 2494 Oakton, request continuance to make a rebuttal to traffic report submitted concerning southbound traffic at the stoplight, existing quad and cube facilities, and it's signed.
Yeah, it is actually northbound traffic, but I believe it's, and you can take a picture. It's clear enough. All right, there has been a request for continuance, and so this case will be continued to a date certain of March 13th, 2019. So we will close that for tonight. All right, very good.
Motion.
We need a motion to what?
A motion to continue to that date certain?
All right, okay. Do we have a motion to continue to that date certain? I don't quite understand why there would be a motion if the petition is by right granted. But-
That's correct.
Yes.
And the rules go on to say that when the next hearing continues, it'll begin with the taking of testimony by those requesting the continuance. So the next hearing will start up immediately with this item.
So no motion is required? Okay, all right, very good. All right, well, thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is case 18 PLND 0100, a planned development at 910 through 938 Custer Avenue. Who is presenting for staff?
Melissa Klotz.
Aha.
Good evening, Commissioners. Melissa Klotz, Zoning Administrator. Similar to what Megan did, I'll give a brief overview of the project and then turn it over to the developer. The developer's request to construct a 40 townhome project at 910 to 938 Custer Avenue. They first request a map amendment to rezone the property from the current MUE Transitional Manufacturing Employment District to MXE Mixed Use Employment District. And they also request a planned development that includes 6 site development allowances. Those allowances are for the number of dwelling units, building height, rear yard setback, townhouse orientation, balcony setbacks, and landscaping. The property is comprised of 64,190 square feet, or just less than 1.5 acres, and they're proposing 20 townhomes that are just over 2,000 square feet, and then 20 townhomes that are just under 2,500 square feet. Each townhome would have a 2-car garage for a total of 80 parking spaces, where 60 are required. And they also request a height of 4 stories with a peak height of 47.3 feet at the highest roof point. Here's the proposed layout of the townhouse units. You can see the black line towards the bottom of the screen is Custer Avenue, which runs south to north, with north being at the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And then the townhouse units would face inward towards the property. There is an alley that bends around the property, shown over on the left side of the screen and the top of the screen, and then with drive aisles proposed heading through the center of the property. With regards to the site development allowances requested, the developer requests a total of 40 dwelling units, where 32 are allowed in the MXE district, and a maximum of 40 dwelling units are allowed as a site development allowance. They also request a building height of 47.3 feet and 4 stories, where 41 feet and 3 stories is allowed. They request a rear yard setback of 5 feet to the alley easement that they are proposing, where 15 feet is required because it is abutting residential on the opposite side of the alley. They request that the townhouse orientations face inward rather than facing the street frontage, and also request balcony setbacks on the front yard, interior side yard, and rear yard. And lastly, they request a reduced landscaping buffer. There's a 25-foot landscaping buffer required along the southwest and north boundaries of the property, and they request a landscaping buffer that varies from 5 to 10 feet in width. Due to the number of site development allowances requested, the developer has agreed to a number of public benefits, including a pay box for the on-street parking that is currently not metered along Custer Avenue. We've also agreed to contribute towards public art and murals that are in the vicinity of the development, a pedestrian countdown timer at the intersection of Main Street and Sherman Avenues, a 4-way stop or other appropriate improvements that may be needed at the Main and Custer intersection, for the development to be net zero or as close to net zero energy as possible, and that includes rooftop solar panels. Significant improvements to nearby Fitzsimmons parks, including benches, lighting, landscaping, and playground equipment, and an additional contribution for the upcoming streetscaping project that will take place on Main Street in the next couple of years by the city. In addition, the applicant is required to abide by our inclusionary housing ordinance. They are requesting to go above and beyond on that as an additional public benefit, where they would provide $125,000 per required unit, where only $100,000 per required unit is required, for a total affordable housing fee of $1 million. And additionally, they are requesting tax increment financing for the development. That is not the purview of the Plan Commission, but just so that everyone is aware of the entire proposal, there is a request for $2.5 million in TIF funds. Staff has a significant number of recommendations on this. The developer is aware of all of these recommendations. Just to point out some of the bigger ones, that would be the pay box on the street, the affordable housing fee that is higher than the requirement, the streetscape improvements, which also includes improvements to Custer Avenue with a turnaround where it currently dead ends, reconstruction of the alley that is currently dirt, and that includes underground stormwater management, burying of utility lines where possible, and then repaving. The additional payments for the Sherman Avenue and Main Street intersection and or Sherman and Custer intersection, the artwork, the goal of net zero energy usage, the Fitzsimmons Parks contributions, and the Main Street streetscaping project improvements. With that, I will turn it over to the developers.
All right, who will be presenting?
Hi, my name is Bill Rotolo, and I am the president of TWM Consulting. I'm the consultant for the ownership, which is a gentleman named Kevin Lee.
Excuse me, did you swear in? Were you present when I asked everyone to tell the truth?
No, I wasn't.
All right. Can you raise your right hand and
Sure
swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you. So Kevin Lee is the owner of the property. Kevin is a major landowner and developer. I believe this is his first project in Evanston. Is that correct? But he has some significant real estate holdings in the city of Chicago and several suburbs and several out of state as well. He has been a home builder in the past. He may or may not be doing this on his own. He may bring in a partner. He hasn't made that determination yet. And that will in part depend on, this city's approval of the project, if it so chooses to do that. In terms of our team tonight, my partner is Marty Murray. He's sitting right there. He's president of Crescent Development Partners. We also have Mike Cook, who is going to be our first presenter. Mike is a civil engineer. He also prepared the site plan, and he will walk you through that, although we're going to keep our comments as brief as possible, hoping to finish in 20 minutes.
Okay.
After that, we'll have a presentation of architecture from Doug Worth from BSB Design, and sort of a companion to Doug is our energy consultant, Craig Burton. We are learning how to be energy conserving. The goal is, and I know, the discussion of net zero has been debated as to whether that's the right term, but we're trying to reach 100% energy give back. So, for example, whatever each unit uses in energy, we're trying to produce that much energy on site. We're doing that through a number of different ways, and we are in a learning process, and that's why we had to hire a consultant ourselves to educate ourselves in that respect. So it's kind of a learning curve. We'll go through it. After that, we're going to have Gary Lehman, who is with MSG Design. He is our landscape architect. We have spent a lot of time on landscaping on this project. If you go into the project area, you'll see it's not very attractive. There's a lot of negative things going on. One of them is the Union Pacific Railroad right-of-way, which is overgrown with invasive species. It's our intent, and there is already a city lease agreement with the railroad to remove and replace that material. I'm not going to get into it now because Gary's going to, but we're hoping to provide seasonal color and interest, and our HOA will maintain that area. It is really not maintained at all right now. Same thing with the wall. It's the embankment along the railroad is literally falling apart. We'll have to do an analysis of that structurally. Visually, it's clearly in bad shape. We'll work with the city to come up with some sort of aesthetic and structural improvements to that wall to make it more attractive. Same thing with Custer Streetscape. Currently, it's in pretty bad shape. Sidewalks, pavement, all need to be upgraded. We're hoping to make this a very attractive streetscape with landscaping, street furniture, and the like. After Gary presents, we'll have Javier Milan from KLOA, a firm that you know well. He will give a very brief presentation of the traffic study we did for this property. We will not be making any TIF presentation, but we do have our TIF consultant here if you so happen to have any questions. And then we'll sum up and go from there. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike Cook from Cook Engineering.
Thanks, Bill. Again, my name is Mike Cook. I'm with Cook Engineering Group. We were the site planners, civil engineers that kind of laid out the property. As Bill presented, we've got a number of people here, so I'll try to make it brief as it regards to our role of what we've done on the property. Melissa, is this, which one do I have? There's a couple of them up here.
It may work, it may not. We're having difficulties.
There you go. Good, okay. The existing site's located on Main Street in Custer. We're at the northeast corner, northwest corner of that intersection. The property to the east is the Metra and CTA tracks. There is, as was mentioned, a public alley both to the south and to the west bordering our property. You can see the zoning classifications that are around there. Currently, it's an MUE zoning district. We're requesting an MXE zoning district. There's neighboring residential to the west, commercial along the Main Street corridor with a lot of businesses and shops. There's a couple pictures taken from the site. This is along Custer on the left side. You're looking northbound into the property to the east. You see the retaining wall, some of the overgrown landscaping that Bill had referenced, and the train tracks that are kind of up on an elevated state. Whereas you go down as Main Street, obviously it's a viaduct that you go underneath both Metra and CTA. Picture on the right's looking back towards Main Street from the alley. These are the current alleys and the conditions of those alleys out there right now. Alleys there, I think we're looking at the west side of the site, both north and south. Really not much of an alley. It's basically gravel, dirt, overgrown, a lot of utility poles. Looking for more at the north end, looking south towards into the site. There's an existing building that's there. Used to house the Dards Products operation before it was purchased by Mr. Lee. Looking obviously along Custer, then that other alley is looking into the site, looking northbound towards the commercial properties towards Main Street on the right. Our development plan that we put together, as mentioned, one of the development allowances requested was the buildings fronting Custer Avenue. Obviously, it made a lot of sense as regards to the property because of its shape, being trapezoidal, to kind of create courtyards and community spaces to where the neighbors are facing each other rather than facing a blighted area and a railroad track. With that, we're able to utilize the existing public alley to the south and to the west as points of ingress and egress. In working with the fire department, we've put in additional 20-foot clear paths, looked at turning movements as it related to fire trucks going westbound to northbound in the public alleys. As part of our proposal, those public alleys will be improved. You saw the conditions of those, but the alleys will be done with 8 inches of concrete over some aggregate base, and then drainage improvements will be provided to where not only would benefit our property, but obviously the neighbors to the south and to the west. We have 2 emergency access locations that the fire department had asked for. They're not going to be done. The residents themselves will not use those, but it'll basically have kind of a component of what's called grasscrete or some type of component that will be able to take the loads of a fire truck to be able to gain access in between the buildings, in between the private drives. As you can see to the backs of the buildings, we will have a couple areas of permeable pavers that we'll install for water quality, not only meeting the stormwater requirements of the city of Evanston, but also MWRD as part of this project. Because of its size and its contiguous ownership, the property itself will also require an MWRD permit in addition to stormwater management meeting the city's requirements. We have a street turnaround that was explained a little earlier as part of the presentation from Melissa. The street turnaround, and the purpose of that is the way Custer Avenue currently sits. If I can back up a couple slides here. The area, as you can see, where Custer's at, the red rectangular area along the east side of our property, extends beyond our north limits, but the intent was there are some parking spaces that are utilized right now that are not metered. Part of our plan is to include a pay station or some type of component there to where that would be metered to more on a temporary basis to where it wouldn't be used by commuters that use the railroad tracks for both Metro and CTA. But that turnaround was a specific purpose for guests or people that are visiting, or for that purpose, even people that are shopping on Main Street, they could utilize along that west side of Custer. But the bump out that we included was to provide pedestrian vehicular traffic to be able to make a 3-point turn on that north end. So that's why the bump out is provided there, as you can see on the north side of Custer, kind of bumped out, but we ran kind of an auto turn analysis to be able to make that movement. You can see kind of 3 different pictures here as it relates to turning movements. The one on the left is the fire truck access that we worked with staff on that. They gave us kind of the geometry to be able to make that maneuver for vehicles to come in off of Custer, go west on the public alley, then north on the public alley, and then back out through kind of the municipal parking lot that goes out towards Sherman. The picture in the upper left corner is just for more general, just a movement for delivery trucks. I mean, again, it's a movement that they would be able to make the pull in. It's going to be more of a learning process for them. Again, at the north end of our site is more of a gated entrance towards the Evanston lumber site. So the vehicles that would go out there would be able to pull into the public alley, back out, and then go back up to the south towards Main Street. And then the picture in the bottom right is the movements that kind of maneuver with the 3-point turn for the pedestrian vehicles that would be able to kind of make the maneuver on Custer and to be able to pull on the 12 guest parking stalls on the west side of the street. There's one slide that wasn't in there. Oh, there it is. In regards to the permeable pavers, we talked about that. We're going to have underground stormwater detention between the private alleys. We're going to work with city staff in regards to coordinating our improvements on Main Street with some of the streetscape stuff that's being done, but we'll be able to make our sewer and water connections within the public right-of-way. We're going to work with the city engineer and her staff in relationship to any upgrades that the city deems necessary on Custer for the water. We have a couple different connections there. All of the water and sewer connections would be coming off the fronts of the buildings, with the stormwater coming off the back. So that's kind of a general overview as it regards to the engineering site plan. I'll let Doug Worth from BSB Design talk a little bit in regards to the architecture and the layout of the buildings.
Good evening. Doug Worth, architect, BSB Design. I've got some materials for you folks to look at, if you would like. So yeah, we'll keep this brief. Melissa covered a lot of it already, but it's a contemporary design. It's a modern interpretation of a townhome. Clean lines, bold geometry, modern materials. There's no historic detail here. This is a very modern approach to townhome type design. As mentioned, 4 levels of living space, and that includes a private roof deck at the 4th floor. Each unit has a 2-car enclosed secure garage. That's in addition to any street parking. We understand the base requirement for LEED Silver certification as part of Evanston's requirement, and we'll get into that more later. Part of that would be rooftop solar panels for each unit. Each unit also has a green roof system. There we go. So here's another look at the exterior architectural character. Once again, you see the modern language and design, very simple, very clean forms. As far as the materials that you folks are looking at now, the first floor is entirely brick. We felt that was important for the architectural character and for the pedestrian experience. So all brick with the exception of windows, doors on the first floor. Moving up, the upper floors are a combination of brick, fiber cement panel, fiber cement accents, and architectural metals. You see it's a small scale here, but you see the sort of accent metal roofs, the metal balconies, railings, various other details. And then in the image on the bottom left, you can see the solar panel array on the roof of each individual unit. So here's it was all pointed out in Mike's presentation, but there's 5 units or 5 buildings on the site. They're all unique, but they're all very similar. They're in 6 or 7, 8, and 9 unit configurations. So we're just going to take a look at one in the interest of time. This would be building 1, the northernmost building on the site. It's the 7-unit building. The project is comprised, as was pointed out, of 2 basic unit types. We'll call them the middle unit, which is a unit that has obviously a unit on either side of it, and then the end units, which are on the either end of the building, have the ability to take advantage of additional light and views. There's a little bit of unique condition as we move from building to building because there's unique site constraints. The buildings get a little bit wider or a little bit narrower. There's different entry conditions. But for the most part, we're dealing with 2 base townhome unit types here. So the plan on the bottom would be the typical first floor plan, and that's a garage and a flexible space that we have multiple options for. The plan on the top, that's the second floor. That's the main living space, and we'll get into these spaces in a little bit more detail in a minute. Next slide. Plan on the bottom would be the third floor, which is bathrooms, bedrooms, and then the upper level, which is the roof terrace space and an adjoining space. So we'll just take a look at one unit type here. This would be the middle unit, which in general is similar to all other units in the end unit. It's a little bit smaller, but in general they have the same layout and the same features. This might be a little bit of a confusing slide. The plan on the very right, that would be the typical design that was offered, and then the other 4 plans are alternates to that. So the base plan that's offered is the 2-car garage, as discussed, that then enters into what we call a flex space, which is a flexible room that could be used for a number of functions. And then there's also the front door, the main entry to the unit that enters that flex space from the front. We have a coat closet and a mechanical closet that houses water heater, furnace, those sorts of things. The other 4 plans, the first 4 from the left, just show the variety of features that are offered. If an owner prefers that there be a bathroom or a powder room at that level, that's an option. If they prefer a laundry room at that level to get laundry and storage functions down there, that's an option. And there's also an option for an additional bedroom at that lower level. This is the remainder of the plans. The 2 on the left, or the first 2 on the left, would be the second level main floor, or main living floor plan. It's a largely open concept floor plan. We're seeing 2 options there. They both have mostly the same components. There's a kitchen, a dining area, a living room, a powder room, and a coat closet. Balcony off the rear, large balcony off the rear that also serves to cover the garage door, and then a smaller balcony off the front. The same plan components for both plans, just a different configuration to give owners, again, a choice. The next two plans, so the third and fourth, show the third floor. The first one, so the one right there in the middle, is a 3-bedroom option with a master bedroom, suite, and then 2 smaller bedrooms in the rear that share a hall bath, a very traditional townhome configuration. The next plan, so the fourth one over, is a little bit of a newer take. It's a 2-bedroom option, but each bedroom has its own private suite with a nice closet, bathroom, and that sort of thing. We're seeing a lot more of that in the market as of late. The final plan on the right is the upper level roof plan. It has at the top you see the roof terrace, which is a habitable space outdoors. At the bottom is the green roof terrace area, and then there's an adjoining space in the middle that accesses both by sliding doors. That's a summary of the architecture. We're going to get into sustainability, and as I mentioned, we understand the requirement, the very base requirement for LEED Silver certification, but as we've gone through this process, as Bill says, of being educated, we've worked closely with Kumar Jensen, who's the sustainability coordinator for Evanston. He's expressed to us the desire to go above and beyond that base LEED certification. So I'm going to bring up Craig Burton, who is our mechanical engineer and sustainability consultant, and he can speak to those proceedings.
Thanks, Doug. I have a slightly different presentation. No, it would be a more colorful one.
You guys have the one presentation you sent me and then the one that you
Right. Is that not it? The second from the bottom?
Look at all that color.
Yeah.
Okay. As Doug mentioned, my name is Craig Burton. I work with Interface Engineering. We're an energy consultancy MEP firm in the city of Chicago. Do a lot of work with net zero buildings and high performance designs in general. Crescent Partners were kind enough to ask us to join the project and help advise them as to what is achievable and sort of the approach to designing and really imagining what a net zero or a high performance sort of version of this building typology would be. So generally speaking, this is the design process we go through when looking at high performance buildings, and I'm going to take a version of this to frame the presentation tonight. So we look at benchmarking building performance to understand what we anticipate the annual consumption, utilities for electricity and gas to be for a building of this type. The building doesn't exist yet, so we can't say, hey, this is the utility consumption, so we have to do some calculations and energy modeling to simulate what we anticipate the consumption of the building to be. And then with that energy modeling tool, we can assess how different measures, whether they're improvements in lighting, appliances, heating and cooling equipment, may result in efficiency improvements, and then we can measure how that relates to a baseline or a regular building. In collaboration with Kumar Jensen from the City of Evanston, we reviewed several documents that were put forward as reference guidelines that are basically design assistance documents that were published in different jurisdictions across the United States. We reviewed those. We provided some feedback and collaboration with Kumar, and that has informed some of our analysis that we'll present here today. So for sake of being clear as to what the analysis is, we took one of the buildings, so building number 3 in the plan that's been presented, and did an overall assessment of the annual utility consumption for that one building, and that allows us to make a fair representation of the individual unit, so residential units, interior and end of terrace designs in calculating their overall energy consumption, as well as the output from any solar array on the project. So that's what we did. Here's a really dumbed down, image of the computer model that we used to simulate the annual utility consumption, which we measure in an engineering term of BTU per square foot per year, which is just electricity and natural gas converted to a common unit type, and then obviously dollars per year. So for formulating the starting point for this analysis, we rely on building codes to define, what is the minimum performance characteristics of a building built today to building code. Evanston enforces IECC 2015, the residential components as it applies to this project. So that's kind of our starting point. And then we looked at across a number of different areas that are responsible for energy consumption in a building, the relative performance that we could specify. So for the walls, for instance, we looked at increasing the level of insulation to keep more heat in the building, less sun out. Looked at different windows, looked at different infiltration rates, which really come down to the construction quality and whether the building is leaky or not. And then also to the performance of the mechanical systems heating and cooling the building. For clarity, or maybe to assist with, sort of navigating all this data, I've tried to highlight measures that we would anticipate would be lower cost measures to the development, such that they're not basically such that you prioritize going after the low-hanging fruit, as in improvements to the project that will have a positive return during the fastest amount of time. So those are highlighted in green. Measures that we anticipate will have a longer return or in yellow, and measures that we would anticipate would be potentially cost prohibitive are highlighted in red. And then we'll use those colors a little bit later on when I present the results of the analysis. I think we're all aware that there's a planned solar array as part of the project. We've also looked at the performance, so the grade of that solar array. There are what we refer to as commodity panels and systems that are available in the market, and they come in at a cheaper price point than premium panels. So premium panels provide more power from the same amount of area. They have a higher efficiency, but they also come with quite a bit of additional cost. So we've included both of those in this analysis. And then looking around town to figure out, whether our modeling is accurate or not in terms of what we'd anticipate a building of this type to consume in terms of utility consumption. We looked at the City of Chicago's benchmarking ordinance, and also spoke with this with Kumar. And we've come up with what we think is a relatively reliable baseline energy consumption. This is a lot of data that I just want to let you know is in there, and there's a lot more data behind this, but I'm going to sort of jump to maybe a more of a highlight chart that allows us to sort of navigate those colors that we referred to before. So low cost being green, mid cost being yellow, and high cost being red. The real conclusion to come to here is that, let's see, just have a laser. There's the building, if constructed today, with the solar panels that are planned on the roof, we would be able to generate over 100%, so 137% of the building's electricity consumption throughout the course of a year. Okay, that's important to note. I've excluded the natural gas for heating domestic hot water from that statement. And that's, an energy model calculation done for this design based on the performance specs that we would anticipate for a building built to energy code and for this quality of construction today. If we were to incorporate additional low-cost energy efficiency improvements, we could extend that percentage to a higher amount, and so on and so on. Once you're over 100%, maybe the allure doesn't mean the same thing. So to make it maybe a little more informative, when we include the natural gas consumption and we convert that natural gas and electricity to a common unit type, which is what is commonplace and what is done in the other two reference net zero guidelines that I referred to at the beginning, we come up with a slightly different number. So with the standard panels and a building built to building code today, we'd be at just between 50 and 60% of the annual energy consumption of the building. And then if we make slight improvements to the building's construction, we can get up to 60%, up to 76%, and then including things that are most likely cost prohibitive for a building of this typology, we may get up to somewhere in the 85% of the total consumption. If we take it one step further and pay for most likely cost prohibitive solar panels that have a higher output, there are slightly different and improved percentages of the total. So hopefully I've brought some of you along with me in the analysis and the presentation of the results. We've basically verified some back-of-the-napkin calculations that we did when the subject first came up, that we can cover 100% of the electricity consumption of the building's demands through what's been presented and configured, and achieve approximately a 50 to 60% reduction in the overall utility consumption of the project using those solar panels.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Back to finding the presentation. Yeah. Sorry.
I have two slides and I'll talk about the landscaping. The first slide is just about the on-site and Custer Avenue. The second slide will be about public benefits. We had mentioned that before, and this kind of characterizes some of the potentials that we have. So on-site, we were looking at roof gardens in between the front facades of the buildings. We would have private gardens. Then along Custer Avenue, we do have some planting along the front or along Custer Avenue within the site. And we do have planting within the embankment of the right-of-way for the railroad right-of-way. There is an agreement that has gone on that the Evanston typically has right now, and we were meeting in compliance with that. So the top left shows a section of Custer Avenue. It's a very narrow right-of-way, so we would have a street tree there, but it's actually on our site. It's too narrow to actually have it within, it doesn't meet ADA compliance to have it within the sidewalk. It's only like 6 feet wide. You put a tree grid in there, you're getting less than 36 inches. Within the embankment, which is about 6 feet up, we just need to be 15 feet off the actual rail. Then we can actually have landscaping. But we do need to correct the heights of some of the species, so you can see this slight dash line because there are power lines along Custer Avenue along that side. So we have to be careful. Within that embankment, we're looking at indigenous and higher performance species to increase habitat. Also, the HOA would be in charge of maintaining it. Over the course of time, it will reduce the amount of water usage based upon the species that we've selected. I put a list over in the top left of the different species that we'd have. And then Just below that, so showing some seasonal interest through spring, fall, winter, and summer. So that gives some characterization for it. The top right characterizes the front yards. Those would be private green spaces for each of the units. We do want those to be diverse and change around, like they could have a patio, then it would be screened in, maybe a small small yard area, but we wanted some diversity there. On the north side, we do have enough space to get a screen along the lumber yard, so we did what we could with that space. And again, on the southeast corner over towards Main and Custer, we do propose a bump out there that would be part of the Main Street streetscape enhancement that will be going on later. And then on the bottom right, we do propose a monument sign on the southeast corner of the site, and have some seasonal interest that would go on there. On the roof garden, it's actually a shallow tray system, so it wouldn't be really deep depth, but that's more for our approach for silver and lead and reducing, or just to be more energy efficient. Then for public improvements, the top left is a map that identifies the neighborhood area, Main Street running down the middle, Chicago Avenue, cutting through there. We looked at the the CTA station. We talked about some different improvements, maybe some planting that could go along the park, along the west side of it, between the rail line and within the park. I know that they have some current bike racks that they've added over the years and stuff, so we didn't want to add too many bike racks, but we could do some public art displays that could go around there. So the map itself actually identifies some current murals that go within the area, but also some opportune areas, like along the embankment on Custer, the Metra along Main Street. There's both sides that could happen, and also some areas that we could have some other public art improvement. The bottom left actually is a small detail for some of the landscaping that we possibly could add to the CTA station. The top right actually are some improvements that we could provide over at Fitzsimmons Park. We didn't want to get too detailed. There's a lot of public improvements and a process that goes along with that, but we just characterized some things that could go on there. The bottom right actually just identifies a potential mural that could go along. This is the south side of Main Street at the metro station. And then, but that's most of it. We were mainly wanting to look at Chicago Avenue with the improvements that have gone along there. We wanted to just, since we have to do some public improvements on here, we want to do some public improvements on here. We wanted to continue that language that's already been going on in that space.
Okay. Could you go to the side plan? It's probably one of the first slides. So. Good evening. My name is Javier Milan. I'm a senior consultant with KLOA Incorporated, and we were retained to conduct the traffic study for the proposed development. So as part of the traffic study, we counted on We counted on Thursday, November 8th, the intersections of Main Street with Custer, Main Street of Sherman, Custer Avenue with the public alley, and Sherman Avenue with the parking lot 31 drive aisle, Lee Street, and the Evanston Lumber access drive further north. Those counts were conducted from 7 to 9 and 4 to 6 to try to collect the heaviest travel times on a weekday. So based on the traffic counts, the peak hours occur from 7:45 to 8:45 in the morning and from 5 to 6 p.m. in the afternoon. So once we have that base, we need to estimate trips for the proposed development, and that's typically done using the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual, and that's what we use. And that traffic was assigned to the area roadways based on the existing travel patterns that were derived from the traffic counts. I would like to point out that although the site is very close to the Metro train station and the Purple Line CTA station, the trips to be generated by the development were not reduced to take into account that some people are actually going to use public transportation and not drive. So we are assuming the worst case scenario. We decided let's go and present the worst and assume everybody's driving. We also don't analyze in a vacuum.
those existing volumes, we need to increase them by a growth factor, and we request projections from the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning to see what is projected to be the growth in the area. And that's just to take into account regional growth. It's any development that could happen that we're not aware of, or just regular growth. So in this case was 0.5% per year, and that was applied for 6 years. Once we have that background, no bill figure, we add our traffic, and then we have the future volumes that we analyze. Based on the results of the capacity analysis, all of the intersections are operating at acceptable levels of service. And in the future, they will continue operating at the same level of service with minimal increases in delay. So basically, that shows that the proposed development traffic, assuming everybody's driving, no one is taking public transportation, will have a minimal impact on the adjacent intersections. So in summary, what I want to emphasize is that the proposed development is located in an urban environment which promotes pedestrian mobility. Given the numerous alternative modes of transportation within close proximity to the site, it also enhances the accessibility to and from the development. We also looked at the census data, and like I said, we never reduce it, but the census data definitely shows that about 25 or 30% of the population or the homes within close proximity to the train station do use it. As part of the development, it was mentioned and it was recommended that pedestrian countdown timers be provided at the intersection of Sherman and Main Street. That's just to enhance the pedestrian accessibility. And then another thing that will be looked at, and this should probably be looked, as the project moves forward, if it does, is just to look at the intersection of Main and Custer and looked into potentially providing signage that indicates there's an access drive. It was Custer in this case. There was a indication from staff or concerns with sightlines. I have been there several times, and I believe the sightline to the east is actually good. I don't have to stick out that much to actually see who's coming. Where I had a little bit of a problem was looking to the west, and it's because the on-street parking spaces on the north side block my vision to see who's coming from the west. So having said that, some of the things that could also potentially be looked at, since they're providing 12 on-street parking spaces on Custer, is just to potentially look or consider removing 1 or 2 spaces in that corner to actually enhance the sightlines. Again, we don't want to lose it. What we're doing is losing those, but then just gaining or providing those on the 12 spaces that will be provided on Custer. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. And Bill, you want to?
That really concludes our presentation. I want to make a few just summary comments. When we first looked at this project, what we looked at was creating sort of a niche housing product that isn't really provided in the city right now. You're not unique. The urban townhouse, kind of high-density urban townhouse close to transit, is a big thing. It's a development type that's mushrooming around the country, and the Chicago area is no different than most other big cities. I personally am working on a number of those projects that are very similar to this. We also felt that there isn't much of this kind of product in the city at all, and it could help keep some people and families that would otherwise need to leave the city to stay here. Who would those be? They'd be younger empty nesters. Older empty nesters don't like all the stairs and floors, but younger ones do. I know this from experience because I've done a lot of these projects. Our typical buyer is mid-40s to mid-50s with kids who are either in high school or college or have no kids or never did have kids. Divorced, singles, whatever you want to term them. The third family type that is starting to look at these are families with children that can't afford a single-family home in Evanston. These homes will probably start in the high sixes and average in the mid-sevens to the eights. But a new single-family home, and if you're looking at new, you're looking at $1 million or more in the city of Evanston for a new home. These units provide a lot of space for the money. They're not perfect. They don't have a lot of yard space, but they do have attractions that people really like. The rooftop deck in this particular location will give you views of downtown Evanston and downtown Chicago. The rooftop decks are very attractive spaces. I don't know if any of you have experienced them, but a lot of people eat up there and just go up there at night and view the city, et cetera. And the fact that we would be doing green roofs, and again, you're not going to have a forest up there. You can't handle the weight or the drainage, but you will have, perennial grasses and things like that. Very attractive. And they're great for growing, potted vegetables and annuals as well. We are going to be providing probably 8 inclusionary housing unit donations. That's $1 million towards the city's fund. That's a pretty substantial hit to the fund, which we would hope would be used in a fashion to promote more affordable housing in the city. I think the big thing is we're taking an area that frankly is not very attractive. It has an outmoded use on it that hasn't had improvements literally in 70 years. There's no drainage, there's no detention. Aesthetically, it's less than desirable. And we'd be creating a TOD environment where you can walk to the train, walk to restaurants, very sustainable, walkable. Frankly, it's the kind of housing that people want today. Active lifestyles, people aren't even home a lot. So this is maintenance free. If they are older and have a residence somewhere else, they can walk away and not worry about their house. It'll be maintained. So we are open for questions at this time, and we are honored to be here, and that's it for now.
Okay, thank you. So I am going to correct the error of my ways with the last presentation and make the announcement that we would be accepting requests for continuance if anyone wishes to make that in writing at this time. Is there anyone intending to request a continuance? All right, that being done, I'm going to open it up for questions from the commissioners. Commissioner Pagozzi, you're very quick.
Yep, I had a couple questions. Great presentation, a good set of documents. I appreciate it. Just curious about the traffic. That intersection at Custer and Main Street is one of the most difficult to navigate. There's people dropping off letters at the post office. It kind of occurs right before the viaduct. It's basically a 4-way stop now. Very difficult to turn right or turn left coming southbound on Custer. I assume that was well covered in the traffic study. Yes, no. You can add. No, it's all right. I had a bunch of questions, so I want to get through it and give other people a chance. The existing parking lot at Fisher Lumber, is that is going to have access to the alley, and will that, in essence, become basically a sort of an alleyway or a street for people wanting? If I lived in that unit, I'd be very tempted to access it off of Sherman to avoid Main Street.
Correct. At the request of staff, and I failed to mention this, at the request of staff, it was indicated that the development should provide some type of signage to actually deter the traffic from exiting to and from Sherman. because it is a parking drive aisle. It is not a drive aisle like, it's a parking drive aisle. It's not supposed to carry through traffic. So staff, in our original study, we actually assumed some people, exactly like what you said, they're going to find it easier to go to Sherman and make a left at the signal.
Yeah.
So staff actually requested that because they didn't feel it was right to actually increase the traffic on the parking lot. So the signage was recommended, again, at the request of staff, prohibiting that.
Okay, so the solution would be signage.
Correct. So, and all of the traffic was assigned to the alley and to Custer. So we're assuming, again, and like I said, the worst-case scenario. I never reduce the traffic volumes to take into account that some people will take public transportation, so.
And then, thank you. And then I had a general question for staff on the TIF funding.
So TIF funding is not actually under our purview?
I understand that, but you're looking at a lot of new bedrooms in the Lincoln attendance area. Lincoln is overcrowded right now, and on top of that, I know that the TIF funding doesn't. I don't know how this one is structured, but sometimes that the TIF funding has a very negative impact on the school district's ability to collect property taxes on the properties that's affected by the TIF, and this is kind of a double whammy, and that they're potentially getting a lot more students that's going to put an extra burden on them. I know it's not in our purview, but I think it's important to mention that because we've never had a project with that combination before. And I think when we look at the overall effect on the city and the neighborhood, I think that is a factor, even though that it's not in our realm. Anyway, that was it.
Okay, so that was not a question?
It was a question.
But,
I mean, I don't know.
yes.
Could someone
Yes.
identify if this TIF does in fact reduce the amount of property tax that the district is able to collect?
Yeah, we can address it real briefly.
Sure, I'd like to.
And just one comment from me. I built several of these projects. So far, they just don't generate a lot of school-age kids, especially younger kids.
Yeah,
okay? There's no yards.
Right, understood. I've
Yeah.
heard that argument before, and
I hear you.
it didn't pan out.
I do understand what you're saying, and we would certainly, one, share that with everybody, and two, we don't really know, to be honest, what will happen. But one, there would be a discussion and an agreement in the redevelopment agreement on the TIF that some of the monies would go to the school district, A. B, the increment here is substantial. We have our TIF consultant here. She can come up real quickly and tell you what the increment is projected to be. But Ann Rooney from Johnson Research Group, you want to give us just 2 sentences?
Yeah, actually, the TIF funding is not within the Plan Commission's
Right,
request.
yes,
It's probably not appropriate at this point, but it is a good point, Commissioner Picozzi, and that would be a great question that we could forward on to staff when the Economic Development Commission takes a look at this request.
And just for the record, we're also not addressing the Affordable Housing Act either as part of our deliberations. All right. Commissioner Goddard?
Yeah, I just have a question. You said you were going to put pedestrian timers at Main and Sherman. Is that right?
It's a recommendation that we presented. The signalized intersection right now, it does have the walk sign on the don't walk, but there's no countdown timers.
But I don't believe there's a traffic signal at Main and Sherman.
There is.
There is?
There is. Yeah. So it's just something that we recommended just to make things better. So.
Commissioner Dubin.
you've used the terms green roof and roof garden, and I'm not sure which you're going to have. I mean, there's a difference between a roof garden and a green roof.
They're used synonymously a lot. So what we're using is a shallow tray system, which is about 4 inches, and we use sedum.
So you would call it a green roof?
It is a green
Okay,
roof, yeah.
thank you.
Other questions? Please.
Hi, I have a question for the setbacks on the south side. So it looks like it's very close to the alley. What's the dimensions there? And it looks like that's asphalt, but the alley is concrete. What was the thinking with that?
The distance between the alley and the back of the buildings is at least 5 feet. And the thought process behind the asphalt and the concrete, originally, when we put the plan together, we didn't really have a specification for the alleys. The alleys came about from discussions with engineers at the city, and they gave us a specification of concrete for the alleys. We have no problem putting those aprons as concrete as well, up to the buildings.
Yep, that's usually the pretty standard in Evanston. A few more questions on the interior space for landscape. So I see that people aren't going to have a backyards, and the front yard will kind of serve as the space, which works. So if this landscaping is being maintained by the HOA, just want to understand, is it going to be everything, or is it just going to be the stuff outside the hedge? Do people still have any say in what's going on? Is there going to be a fence to get into it? Just like a few of those questions.
So the top right corner, those are actually owned by the individual units.
Yeah.
So that front yard area. So basically, that property is defined by them. So one of the scenarios has a hedge. Another scenario has like a fence. So that's maintained by them. But outside of that, it's maintained by the HOA.
Okay. Has there been any discussion about having a fence to get into the big paths that go along the whole center to keep people from walking through there?
Like right through here.
Yeah.
No, there hasn't at this point.
Okay.
But we can note it.
I'm not recommending it. Just
Okay.
wondering. Another question on the green roof. Just so I understand the roof plan. Is it just a green roof? Is there also patio space up there? And would people change out the green roof if they want to put in more paving?
To answer
They
your
actually have different load requirements.
Yeah.
So technically,
Okay.
And so to answer your question, there's both. So the plan on the far right of this, the area on the top is a roof deck, is an outdoor space for people to use. The area at the bottom is the tray system green roof. So they're both accessible, although obviously have very different purposes.
I just want to make sure that the green roof has water access. I mean, it's good that it has access to get up there, but it won't work unless there's someone's able to get up there if they need to.
Yeah, and the plan is for sliding doors. So.
Okay.
Anyone else? So I guess I just want to be clear. This is a single property. So the front yards, as they are, which I'm not sure where they are, those are. And I guess this is a question for staff. Is there any zoning requirements on this, or is this all internal, do as you want, or are there controls on this as a single property?
The zoning requirement for the front yard is where the property is abutting Custer,
Okay.
and that setback is made.
So it's only as a whole property, not as individual
Correct.
units.
When the developers are talking about the front yards, that's not per what the city considers a front yard, but that's what each individual unit will have as private space.
I see. Okay. And so in that landscape plan with the bright green and the, so in the center area, the common element is really only the walkway width, whatever that is, 5 or 6 feet, the sidewalk, and everything from that to the face of the building is the owner, the unit owners, to do as they want.
It's a mix of ownership. Underneath the building will be fee simple, owned by the townhome owner, as well as 5 feet on both sides, both the garage side and let's call it the front door side.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the end units, the front door is on the
side,
end.
yeah.
Right. So, and it was designed that way to look more like a front than an end. I think we might adjust the fee simple ownership to include everything within the, let's call it the yard area, within either the fence or a bush area, so that's fee simple as well. Everything else would be HOA and HOA maintained.
Mm-hmm.
So the walkways, any other common green space, the parking courts, and by the way, between each garage door is a tree. We've done this, you can do it. It requires special trees and special maintenance, but at the end of the day, if they're maintained, it eventually will look like a street. They're kind of cool.
So the entry side is there's no uniformity to that. It's fences can.
No, there is uniformity.
There's no.
They'll all be the
fence
same.
legislation or
No, they'll all be the
requirements
same.
in the covenants.
Yeah,
of the
very strict design
homeowners
standards, and you
associations
can't change them. You can't paint them pink. You
Right.
can't. Same with the rooftop decks. There'll be a prohibition to removing the green. You were saying something? Oh, okay.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. So then I'm just wondering a couple of things. Did you do a actual market study for this? And
Yes, we did.
okay, and
Yeah, it
there
was
was
pretty
sufficient
strong.
demand. So, okay.
Yeah, there's, let's face it, there hasn't been a new townhome development built since the recession, so.
Okay, and then I noticed that there are some options on floor plans and things. So is there some kind of lease-up strategy or pre-sale strategy for development, or you have some intention?
Yeah, well, these are for-sale units, so there wouldn't be a lease-up, but.
Oh, well, yeah, pre-sale.
There would be a sales operation during construction. Where that is, I don't know. We might consider renting a retail space on Main, if there is one. If not, we'd have to do it on site. But as you know, it's a buried site, so we'd need some signage somewhere. So the ideal would probably be to lease a space on Main.
Sure. But you intend to start construction without pre-selling so many units, or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Commissioner Draper, were you going to, or Halleck, were you going to? Okay, you're turning it off. Okay, all right, very good. So no more questions from commissioners. All right, so we have a number of people who are requesting to speak tonight. So at this point, we're asking questions. So I'll go through the list as people signed in and see if you would like to ask questions relevant to the testimony of the petitioner. So Ashraf Manji? I'm sorry, did I do any justice to your name? Or
Pretty close.
Pretty close? Okay. Please be kind to me.
My name is Ashraf Manji.
Yeah.
I own property at 1038 Custer Street, which is down the block after the Evanston Lumber properties. In general, I like the idea. I like the idea of changing the zoning from manufacturing to mixed use. I think it makes sense. The area, I think, eventually will become or mostly residential, and I think you need to keep in mind that the concessions that you give right now to this property will set precedent for a number of other properties that will be developed there. And if that continues, it will significantly change the character of that neighborhood, which I think, if you know the neighborhood, is a very nice, mostly single-family home type of neighborhood. So the main point I'm making is that you keep in mind, in giving whatever concessions you give or recommend, that they will set precedent. In general, if you change the zoning, then I would suggest that you keep the construction or the project mostly to what's allowed by the new zoning, which means 32 units maximum rather than 40, if at all possible, 3 stories rather than 4, and side yards and backyards and so on, that you try to keep as much as possible to what the new zoning would require.
All right.
That's all.
All right, thank you. So I just want to reiterate, at this point, it's questions of the petitioner, and later on, you'll have an opportunity to make statements. So, Mr. Stan Eastman, do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Could you please come to the microphone? And okay.
Will Evanston Lumber continue to operate where they are, or will this take over part of Evanston Lumber as well?
You could. Why don't we respond to them as they come? If anyone has a.
So this will not take over the property where Evanston. No.
Yeah.
My question is, will it take over the property where Evanston Lumber is today? No. Okay. So Evanston Lumber, as far as you know, will continue to operate in this spot.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Yes. All right. Calvin Lynn, please. Do you have any questions? All right. Hilly Hacker. And please state your name and address.
Hille Hacker, 931 Sherman Avenue. I just have a question because you refer to the potential buyers or so as families with children of whatever age, but maybe not small, not too big. There are the new models of intergenerational homes, and I just ask you whether you looked into that, where you rent out actually, let's say, the first floor, but you have to construct it differently then, where the elderly don't have to kind of walk up all the stairs, and then you rent out the second or third floor to younger people. And in Europe, they're really making very, very good experiences with that model, also to mix the generations and to mix the ages. I just wonder whether you looked into that and whether that would be an option, at least to reserve some of the units for such a kind of new form of intergenerational living. Because it seems to be a little bit odd to say the elderly then can move on somewhere else.
All right.
Excuse me. I didn't sign in. I got here late. But I would like to ask a couple questions of the developer. I don't want to be out of order, though.
All right. Did anyone want to respond to that question right now while you come and sign in? That's fine. You've got special.
I'll be honest, I'm not an expert at that kind of housing. I've certainly read about it. I'm not aware of any that are being developed right now, but it's certainly something I could look at for the future. For this project, I think it's a little bit late, and I don't even know how it would fit in the zoning ordinance. I didn't explore that. Did you have a comment?
So, no is a fine answer, but
yeah. And as far as renting out part of the unit, I can't speak to that. But the option for 2 bedrooms, which is each a suite, is a response to increased multi-generational households. And it's in single-family homes. It's been going that way for maybe 5 years, and this is a way to introduce that to townhome living as well. So.
All right. Martin Renke.
Yes, my name is Martin Ranke. Thank you.
Address, if
I
you
also
can
live
also,
at
please.
931 Sherman Avenue. We're just at the west side of the building block. And my question would be, is there any, you mentioned in your plans that you want to put concrete onto the alley, and you also want to replace the poles for utilities. Would that involve any costs for us, or would that be paid fully from the developer? Thank you.
Okay.
That would be our cost. There would not be any cost to you or the city. So, those alleys need to be completely rebuilt. They're really just gravel.
Also utilities?
Yeah, utilities, we have to work with ComEd and the other utility companies, but we have to replace,
Costs for us?
no, no cost to you. No cost to you. No, and ComEd is difficult, but
Yes.
we will be removing some of those poles because they're in front of garage doors, so we have to take them out. So they would be going underground probably.
All right, Ellen Frank Miller, question.
Okay, Tom. I'm Ellen Frank Miller, 924 Sherman Avenue. I live across the street from the parking lot that is not going to be an access point. Could someone kindly put the map up there that shows where the alleys are? Because my questions are related to the traffic flow.
You want it more in a bigger picture?
Yeah, this one I think is, no, actually back to that one. Yeah, where you, yeah, that's perfect. So, so I live across from the parking lot there, which apparently will not be an access point. So if I'm understanding correctly, all of the cars, if I see here, have access to Custer Street. Is that correct? Where those emergency access boxes are?
The cars have access?
Yeah, so in other words.
No, not from Custer, direct access from the garages to Custer. Those are going to be, emergency vehicles will have access
Okay.
in the event that fire trucks or ambulances need to get in the rears of those buildings.
Got
But
it.
no, the pedestrian, the people living in there will not come out to Custer. They'll utilize the alley.
The alleys on both sides.
Correct.
So if and I assume that the Evanston lumber, if you look immediately to the north and west end of the development, that's where the Evanston lumber driveway is. I assume that's also not an access point?
No, we're not going through any of the site through Evanston Lumber. There's
Okay.
actually a gate at the north end of our property on Custer.
Correct, but on the Sherman Avenue side. So if you go through the alley that is to the west of your property, if you continue down, sorry, is there that? Thank
I
you.
thought there was another one that we had. Hang on, let me see if there was a bigger picture like that, maybe? Does that help?
The other one is actually better. I can show you where I'm.
Get rid of that one?
Is this the?
Does it have a pointer?
Oh, in the middle.
Top button.
Okay.
There you go.
Can you take me back to
Which one?
the picture we were on before?
The
with
colored one?
The
Or
emergency
overall?
rooms?
The plan. Okay.
The plan.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
There
Yeah,
you go.
that's perfect. So, oops, that was the wrong thing.
Go to the right.
Go to the right.
There you
Okay,
go.
how do I get the pointer back?
Middle, the middle.
The middle
There
here?
you go.
Okay, that's what I just did.
Is it out there? There you go.
There we go. Okay, so this is the parking lot that leads on, this is Sherman Avenue right here. If you continue down the alley here, this is the Evanston lumber driveway.
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to clarify, the vehicles that are coming here through the alley, they're not to exit here. They're also not to exit through Evanston lumber, I assume?
Correct. They're coming out to Custer along the two improved alleys that we're making.
Got it. So all of the cars, anyone who's leaving from these driveways or from these, they're all coming out here.
Correct.
Okay, wonderful. So, question about this corner that you are widening. Does this have any impact on the parking lot that currently exists here that opens up onto Main Street?
That does not. They're not interconnected right now. The parking lot in Maine is up at a higher elevation than the alley on the south side of our property. So there would be no interconnectivity and there would be no impacts to the parking lot on Main Street.
Got it. So the widening of that alley doesn't affect that parking lot that's elevated?
The only widening that's occurring is on the north side. Everything on the south side is not being touched, other than being improved to concrete to meet the city standards.
Okay. So the traffic, any cars that are leaving, they're all coming out here onto the corner of Custer and Main?
Correct.
That's correct? Okay. So as I was looking at the traffic impact study, that intersection, I guess, has a really poor grade at the moment, like a D or an E, which, none of my students would want that grade. But basically what I understand is that the impact study says this won't worsen the traffic there because it really can't get any worse. It's bad. So if we do assume that we're going to have additional cars coming out here, at least some, although I agree that certainly, hopefully, many people will want to live there for the access to public transportation. Over here, ooh, shoot, I apologize. I did something and I can't get the pointer back. I apologize.
Yeah, what were you looking at here,
This is
ma'am?
going to be easier. So right here at this corner.
Here?
Thank you.
Over here?
Yeah, just north, or just to the west there is the crosswalk, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yes.
This is, so right here.
In the middle, just press hard. There you go.
There we
It's
go,
over
thank
there.
you. So am I correct that right here is the crosswalk across Main Street that lots of people use to get to Metra?
Correct.
Okay, so I agree that I think the comment that was mentioned about the parking space and reducing a parking space to increase the visibility seems really useful. The question that I have here is, one more? Okay. So this is where you have pedestrians crossing and you have people who want to turn right. So because you're making that turn, you have pedestrians here. Is there any conversation about signage in terms of yielding to pedestrians or just generally?
Let the traffic, because there's obviously, there's some of the things that were listed in the staff report.
Yeah.
Of what we were doing at that intersection of Custer. and-
Yeah, I know, it was the,
Point well taken. Like you said, that's where the crosswalk is that people utilize to go to the train station. So yes, I mean, certainly signage could be provided in there to say, watch out for pedestrian. You know that it's the law in Illinois.
That is already there. It doesn't work.
Correct. So, but again, there's other things that can be done in terms of additional signage, and not over cluttering, of signage, but newer signage. For example, there's the law in Illinois, stop for pedestrians in the crosswalks, and you see those signs very often. You see them in shopping centers, in which you basically have to stop because you have the people crossing.
They are there, but there's the bridge.
we're limiting the questions to 2 minutes. All right, so 2 minutes, we're already at about 4.5 or 5 minutes. And this shouldn't be a discussion, it should be a question and
I
answer,
apologize.
please.
So yes, signage, additional signage, could be looked at and evaluated as to what would be the most appropriate signage that could be provided in there. And as it was mentioned, removing one parking space would actually make a big difference in the intersection.
There was something
Correct.
mentioned about a four-way stop. Is that going to be addressed?
Okay, last question, okay? So four-way stop.
The four-way stop would be probably the last recourse, for that, because in order for you to apply the four-way stop control at that intersection, you have to meet the warrants for 8 hours. During the peak hours that we collected, it appears that it meets it, but I don't know if the volumes are there for the additional 6 hours. So if you don't have the volumes in there to warrant an always stop control intersection, it is not wise to install an always stop. Then an accident happens and it opens liability.
Okay. All right, David Adams. No questions, all right. Jeff Silver.
Thank you. Jeff Silver, I'm a resident of 933 Sherman. Push the center there. 933 is, so 931 is actually this building right here. 933 is directly in front. They are 2 units, it's a 2-unit condo, legacy building from the 1800s. It was eventually converted, I guess. My question for you here is, you're talking about variances. These buildings that are here are approximately 25 feet But the alley width there is 18 feet? It was 18?
18, and we'll provide a clear path of 20 feet as requested by the fire department.
Okay. So,
And I think we're 25 feet from our west building face at a minimum distance to the west right-of-way line of the alley.
okay, so for these buildings here, they're going to be 44 feet tall. So, doing the math, that's 16 feet taller than the buildings that are directly against the alley right now. And we certainly have one. There's a coach house over here. There's some other outbuildings as well there. So they're going to be 50% taller than the buildings that they're abutting up against, as opposed to the 10 or 12 foot tall single story building that's there. Is that correct?
Yes, but also the ones at the corner where they live, in front of the larger building, I believe they're shorter than that.
I'm sorry, I'll need you to answer at the microphone for the...
Okay, it sounds like, to clarify, that yes, the building that's there now is about 1 story. It's going to be replaced with a building that's about 45 feet tall, which is about 16 or 17 feet taller than the buildings that currently abut the alley. So, okay. Are you planning on paving the rest of the alley from past your property up to Evanston Lumber, or is the paving going to stop there and leave gravel for the remaining portion?
That's...
Our
yeah.
current proposal calls it...
Can you please step, yeah.
Our current proposal calls it for it to be contiguous to our property, both along the west property line and the south property line.
Correct, okay. All right, so your time is getting very close to the end, okay?
My last question, you've somewhat addressed the electrical lines that are supposed to be buried along the alley. Really does not work well. Right now, the power lines run from here to the houses that are here. So are we to expect that ComEd will likely have to trench and bury the lines up to the properties that are there? So
I wouldn't think at this point that we would need to do that, but again, we've got to coordinate that work with ComEd. So the specifics of the design have not been done. They will dictate to us what the design will be in the alleyway, because it's their infrastructure and their utilities.
But if there is cost in order to tear up parking spaces?
It's not out of any homeowner's expense on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, lastly, Robert Fisher, please.
My name's Robert Fisher. I own Evanston Lumber, which is 1001 Sherman Avenue. It's also 942 Custer and 946 Custer. And I've got a couple of brief questions for the developers.
Okay.
One for the traffic study gentleman. And first and foremost, has the developers made any provision for parking during the construction for the workers? Because it's going to add a tremendous amount of parking load to places that really don't have parking now. And I'm certain that my Main Street neighbors, the store owners, don't want people long-term parking on Main Street.
We've generally discussed it with staff, but we haven't come up with any plans. And until we do our final engineering, we probably won't. But we're absolutely open to working with you and with the city to come up with something that works, because obviously it has to work. We don't want to impede your business at all.
Okay. Next question for the traffic gentleman. Looking at the plan, I see that this young lady pointed out there's going to be an awful lot of traffic coming in and out of this 40 units. I don't know road construction, I apologize, but is there enough room on these alleys, or these alleys you're creating? I'm sorry. Is there enough room for two-way traffic to easily go past each other?
Speak into the microphone, please.
Yes, the proposed widening will accommodate two-way traffic, and plus it's going to be improved with concrete.
Okay. Is there general statements also at some point?
There will be, yes.
That's my only question.
All right, thank you. All right, so at this point, we will open it up to statements from the public and go back through the list. I believe Ashraf Manji, did you make your statement? Yeah, okay, thank you. Stan Eastman, wish to make a statement? Okay, please.
All right.
Again, it's, please limit your comments to 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I have 3 points I want to make. Oh, by the way, my name is Stan Eastman. I live at 813 Sherman Avenue. I own a house there, so it's very close to this development. So the first thing I want to say is if you look at the charts, the things they put up on the wall, you can say, oh, yeah, I can see that building there. If you walk over to the site and look at the drawing and realize how out of place it would be, you realize that is not an appropriate site for this building that they're proposing. To follow up on what this gentleman said, I understand that you may need to rezone it so it can be residential in there, but I would strongly urge my representatives here not to grant all of these other exceptions. Because if you built a property there that fell within these requirements, it would be to scale for the neighborhood and might be appropriate. The other thing, so that's my main point, I'd really like to urge you not to grant all of these exceptions for this property. If you walk over there, and Mr. Pagozzi, it sounds like you have been at that intersection. That intersection is very dangerous. I avoid it like the plague. It's never going to be good because it's right where CTA and Metro crosses, so you can't really see. So yes, if people live there and they have their opportunity to go through that parking lot, that's what they'll do. I mean, there's just no question. That's what they're going to do. And then the third thing I want to say is, you know, good architect. So this neighborhood, we have stately 1920s apartment buildings. We have 1880s, 1900 clapboard houses. We understand everything is not always going to stay the same. But good architecture takes into account the neighborhood. It uses similar scale, similar materials. So when you get a new building, it feels like it belongs. This does not. This might be okay on Chicago Avenue or in a brand new development. It is not appropriate for this neighborhood. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. All right. Calvin Lynn. Hilly Hacker.
Yep, Hilda Hacker from 931 Sherman Avenue. I can actually almost repeat what you said, and since we are not repeating, I can be very short. But I want to rhetorically ask you why you do not just stick to the regulations that are there with the 3 stories and the space that you get. And I do not understand why the planning committee or the staff members do not follow the rules that Evanston has said. So I just want to repeat, yes, it may be good to develop it into a residential area, but all the rest does not necessarily make sense to me. And as a resident there on 931 Sherman Avenue, who will be tremendously affected by a 2-way alley, street traffic, I must say I do not understand why this should be granted.
Okay, thank you. You know the order, huh?
Martin Ranke again. I actually see the location offers actually a great chance to build something which takes advantage of the L and the metro trains and therefore reduces traffic. And therefore I cannot understand that each house has 2 garages or 2-car garages. If you would reduce the amount of cars there, you would be able either to maybe put it down to 3 stories, because as I see it, almost half of the surface on the ground floor is used by car traffic or car storage. If you reduce that space, you might even be able to get the 4th floor away, which also would make it more affordable, and which would probably also attract people who want to make use of L or metro trains and you might get these people rather than people who depend on 2 cars to create more traffic and also to create more carbon dioxide. That's one point. The other point is I strongly doubt that people will use the alley to Custer. It's so narrow. Once there's a garbage truck, no one will come past it. So you have to really widely widen this alley to be able to come past these trucks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Ellen Frank Miller.
Hi,
Thank you.
Ellen Frank Miller, 924 Sherman. I'm very excited to see this property being developed and to have homes in this location. I am generally in favor of this. I have concerns about the traffic, as I mentioned, and in particular, we have a lot of young families on Sherman Avenue. That's an area where people frequently blow off the traffic stop light on Sherman and Main and fly down there. If you have people who are not supposed to be coming through that parking lot, but perhaps still doing so, we could end up with a really unpleasant situation. So my request would be that the city consider what the options would be for enforcement of that rule with regard to people exiting from the alley onto Sherman through the parking lot. But in general, I'm in favor, and I also will go to the website to look up more information on how we can understand TIF, which I suppose is not being addressed by this body. So if anyone has any suggestions on where to look, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. David Adams.
I don't have much to add. It did occur to me that why do you have to have 4 stories? Why do you have to go up almost 50 feet in a neighborhood where you have these little story-and-a-half houses, even though it's on the edge of the neighborhood? I suppose this is idealistic, but are there any provisions for developers compensating the people who are going to be, in the shadow of this development across the alley? I know there's a really nicely kind of fixed up coach house right back there that's going to get, they're going to have to wait till lunchtime to see the morning sun. So I don't know. I guess that's about it. There's a school not too far away. If we're talking about traffic. It's not right up against the school, but it's not that far away from Nichols School. So, I mean, I think it's kind of neat. And right now, I think I know somebody whose girlfriend used to make hors d'oeuvres at a factory on that site. But anyway, so so I think it's kind of a cool thing. But I think, as usual, it would be nice if we could sort of kind of shrink the thing down. I'm thinking that there might be room for people to still make some money, and then maybe some sort of compensation to the people who are going to lose the sense of space and sun on the other side of the alley. And of course, that whole idea of going out that intersection onto Main Street through Custer, that's sort of like a definition of a bottleneck right there. But I don't know how you're going to do it. You can't move the train, you can't move the post office. But people are right on that intersection, dropping letters in the mailbox that's out on the sidewalk. So maybe that's going to have to get lost anyway. But okay.
Thank you. All right, Jeff Silver, please.
Jeff Silver from 933 Sherman. I really want to love this idea. That the property that's back there is a warehouse. It's a brick wall. It's not pretty. But I share the same objections, I think, that my other neighbors do. It's big. It's packed in. There's going to be a lot of traffic. I understand why we want to try and push traffic out the alley and preserve the front. But everybody who's going to Jewel, everybody who's going north, they're going to come out the alley, they're going to turn right, they're going to go through Evanston Lumber, they're going to go through the parking lot. We already know that's going to happen. The traffic at Custer, I take the Metro every day. We're a one-car family with 5 of us, and I walk across that sidewalk, and one day a week, guaranteed, somebody will blow through it. I've had school buses while I'm standing in the crosswalk that will fly through there. I mean, it's a terribly dangerous intersection already with a ton of traffic, and people don't pay attention. They don't see you. I live directly behind this, and I don't want to be compensated for it. Or rather, maybe the compensation that I want is for the council to stick by the zoning that's there. 32 units, 40 units, if you want to squeeze them down, that doesn't bother me. What bothers me is there's a fairly large setback that's supposed to be to the alley for the adjoining properties that we're going to lose. And we're going to lose light. We're going to have buildings that are right up on top of the property that's there. We already share half a lot. It's a quirky situation. We don't have a lot of space around us, and to see suddenly 40 units dumped in this area, which is full of 1880s, 1900s Victorians and 2 flats, it just doesn't fit with the character of the neighborhood. So I'd encourage you to deny this as is, and ask that the development group come back and try and find a method that fits more with the character of the neighborhood, which is more suitable and would still be profitable for them.
Okay, beautiful, thank you. And you were 1 minute and 58 seconds. Perfect. All right, Robert Fisher, you're the last one.
Start the stopwatch.
Yeah, I got it.
I'm not going to reintroduce myself. I own Evanston Lumber. My family's been there since 1948, so I'm the 3rd generation owner and operator of that property. And of course, I'm excited about any kind of development or redevelopment on our little Custer Street. But Custer Street for the last 70 years has been the lifeblood. That little street, as blighted as it may be, it's the lifeblood of my business, and I keep 50 families employed. And so what I would like to make sure of, that I go on record to say, Custer in Maine is a nightmare. We've got 5 to 15 semi-trailers of material coming down Custer Street every day, every weekday when we're open, to unload, and that's the lifeblood of my business. Traffic study was done on November 8th. That's a slow period of time for us. I would challenge them to come out during the summer and record the number of semis that have to make that impossible turn from Maine onto Custer to come down Custer to our back gate. Unless I move that business, I can't change that. I intend to stay, I intend to get the 4th or 5th generation to stay in Evanston at that business. Now, I just want to make sure that these gentlemen understand that this is a safety issue now. It's very difficult the way these semis come in right now. And if you're adding traffic and you're adding more cars, it's just going to exacerbate the problem. So again, I would just ask that that consideration is made. Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good, thank you.
How'd I do on the time?
Oh, you're like way under. Star. Yep, star, great star. All right, very good. So, so I believe with that we will close the public testimony portion of the wait a second. So actually, the petitioner can have a moment to make a closing statement or rebut anything that's happened if they would like to. You're fine? Okay, very good. So we're going to close the public testimony and go to deliberations by the commissioners. So does anyone have any comments or viewpoints or additional questions that they would like to share? Commissioner Hallett, go ahead. It's fine.
Okay, this is going to be several thoughts. I think that it's difficult these days to build new housing that's affordable. And affordable is a relative term. I realize that, and so $600,000 is probably not affordable for a lot of people, but it's better than $1 million. And in Evanston, you have very nice older homes that are larger, But the sellers of these homes, usually want a little bit more money for them, and it's just a problem. It's a problem in Evanston. It's a problem in Chicago to create these units that are big enough, not too big, very efficient. I frankly see the people that are going to buy these units as young families, honestly, more than older people, because they're looking for that product, I think. And I'm not going to address traffic at all. And it sounds like traffic at Main and Custer is a big problem, and I think that should be addressed. But I do want to address the architecture. These units I've been looking at the plans. I think they're very efficient, almost too efficient, frankly. The bedrooms up on the second floor, the second and third bedrooms are 8'5" wide. That seems very wide, and you might want to consider, to the point of, do we want 40 units or 32 units? You might want to consider making them, and maybe you did, making them a little bit wider, a little bit more usable, and therefore less units. I don't know. I realize you have to have a certain amount of units to make your performa work and all of that. So I appreciate that. Scale. This is, I think, what they're asking for is just a few feet more than what's allowed under zoning, correct? Is it? I think that's what it is, isn't it?
Make that factual?
They're allowed to have 3 stories or 41 feet, and they're requesting 47.3 feet.
41 to 47, so it's 6 foot more. I personally don't consider that a big deal, especially since the top floor is set back. It's not even a full floor. So I don't think the height, to me, I don't think the height's an issue. I think in terms of how the project appears on the street, because of the site plan, it's not really dense along the street. There are these large openings in between the rows of units, so I don't think it's going to appear very dense from the street. As far as style goes, if you walk around Evanston, all of Evanston, there's a ton of different architectural styles, and frankly, I think that's what makes neighborhoods rich. So I know that's my viewpoint, and I know there's a countering viewpoint that says that everything should be sort of similar in neighborhoods. I don't particularly believe that. Yeah, I guess that's all I wanted to say, just those comments.
Okay. Before we go any further, I would like to there's 2 things that are being asked. One is the redistricting from the MX, what is it, MUE to MXE, which would allow residential. Okay, so that's one issue. So I think I'd like to consider that separately than the 6 allowances that are being asked. You have a...
Sure, and just to clarify, both zoning districts do allow for residential. The requirements are a little bit different between the 2.
Okay. Okay.
But residential is allowed with both zoning districts.
So it allows more can you summarize the difference that it allows more? I know it's in here, but...
Yeah, the FAR is greater in the MXE district, and I believe some of the setback
is less. Yeah, okay. All right. So, who else? Anyone have anything to say? I can't believe Commissioner Pagozzi doesn't. Yes.
I left it on the table.
Okay.
I just want to agree with Commissioner Halleck. I lived in an old neighborhood. It's tough to see changes. Yes, there is a height difference, but again, we need this type of housing in Evanston. And in my family, I've got a young couple who own a building, an apartment almost like this, and my divorced mid-60s sister-in-law who own an apartment like this. So I think there's a need for it. I agree it doesn't look like our old brick buildings, but again, I think it is part of what makes Evanston Evanston. And again, though I acknowledge it's tough to see this kind of change.
Commissioner Draper.
Just some comments on the site plan. I'd say that in general, I think that this will definitely be an improvement over the brick building now. I know it seems large at the moment, but it will be breaking up the space compared to just one solid brick building that's taking over like 90% of the space. I think we have to think about that as well. And there will be creating these courtyards in between, which will be a nice feature. My comment about the architecture would probably be that along Custer, I understand that this is facing a Metra in a not so great location, but it's also the arrangement of the windows, and there isn't much of a rhythm that has really been kind of left to feel a little bit like the back, but Custer is the front. So I would just say that I would like to see a little bit more emphasis on what that view is like if you're going down Custer. But I do applaud the ideas here of making it a net zero development. I mean, no, there's not that many in Evanston that have gone that way, and same with green roofs, and adding that amenity, I think is, it's, you know, I definitely recommend that.
Okay, anyone else? All right, so I just have a couple of thoughts. One, Mr. Renke's comment about the lots of cars, the two-car garages, kind of clarified to me what has really been bothering me about this is it's being sold as a TOD, and with every other TOD, we've tried to reduce the amount of cars and things, and this seems to be a development that is trying to be both and a dual car owner kind of development as well as an urban solution, which is a little bit odd to me, and I think it was a very perceptive comment to say that the scale could be reduced, or even better living environments on the ground floor, as you addressed for apartments, if you start to limit the amount of car traffic or provisions for automobiles that are there. Again, I also share the concern. I really had no idea about the amount of delivery traffic that goes down Custer. I happen to live in the area and frequent the area a lot, but wasn't so informed about that. I think one of the things that I find probably I do see a lot of commuter parking or things there, but the street turnaround to me seems a rather weak effort at what could be there. That traffic would be facilitated by a larger turnaround, and even at the expense of losing one unit to facilitate turning traffic around. But that's just a comment of mine. So. What I would like to see is if commissioners are ready, standards, yes. Can we get the standards out and run through those? All right, so standards for amendments, standards for special use. All right, standards for amendments. In general, whether the proposed development is consistent with the general goals, objectives, policies of the comprehensive plan, I believe that has been stated that it is. Whether the proposed amendment is compatible with the overall character of the existing development in the immediate vicinity of the subject property. I think addressing that is that it is an improvement on the abandoned nature of the surrounding area, and whether the proposed amendment will have adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties. I don't think that has been proven, so that is satisfied. And staff states that the public facility, that it's adequately serviced by public facilities and services. Correct? All right. So I liked it when you guys would put little marks in here and have your own assumptions, but okay. It's one of the special uses specifically listed in the zoning ordinances. It satisfies that. It's in keeping with the purposes and policies of the adopted comprehensive plan. I think we stated that it was satisfying. It will not cause a negative cumulative effect. That it, I think, is obvious that it's an improvement. It does not interfere or diminish the value of property in the neighborhood. That has not been proven that it will. It can adequately be served. Again, it does not cause undue traffic congestion. I think it's been testified that the traffic congestion is already an issue, and that it itself is minimally affecting it. But there are issues. It preserves significant historical architectural resources, is not really applicable. Number 8 is not necessarily applicable, and in fact, it is striving for better than LEED in environmental features, LEED Silver. And number 9, it complies with all other applicable regulations in the district which it is located, applicable ordinances, except to the extent that it is modified through the plan development process or grant of variation. I believe that it does that and is within the development allowances. Is that correct? It's within the set, okay? And the last issue, standards for development. So as a special use plan development involves such special considerations as the public interest that shall be required to adhere to specific plan development requirements. So as the plan commission zoning, the commission shall recommend approval, nor shall the city approve a plan development unless each shall determine based on written findings of fact that the plan development satisfies specific standards established in the zoning district in which the plan development is located. So if we're moving this to an MXE zoning, I believe it would satisfy that. So I think it meets the standards as stated. Oh, come on. That's too much. All right, one more. Let's do it. Oh, geez. All right, the MXE district. I was prescient. Each plan development should be compatible with the surrounding development and not of such nature, height, as any contrary to promise the intent of zoning, a section, purpose, and intent. So the height and bulk, I believe it's been stated that it is marginally higher than what is allowed by right within the district, and the bulk is diminished by the narrow faces that was present before with the continuous development. So at ground level, it has significantly more open space. Each plan development shall be compatible and implement adopted by the comprehensive plan as amended. For the downtown plan for this is not applicable? That's not applicable. Each plan development shall be completed within 2 years of issuance of a special permit as plan development. So saying you've got 2 years to do it. No special use permit for a plan development shall be valid for a period longer than 1 year unless the building permit is issued and construction actually begun within the partial. So that will be determined All landscaping treatment within the planned development shall be provided in accordance with the requirements set forth in Chapter 17. I believe that the landscaping goes above the requirements with the other embankment plantings and contributions. So
Did you hit 2H?
2, we said, is not applicable. H? 2H. I can't. Can you read it? I can't see it.
Impact on schools, public services, and facilities.
Aha. Well, you would say that.
Forgive me, I served on the school
Yeah.
board for 6
Yeah.
years, so I know that it has an adverse effect.
Well, considering, yeah, it could, and we do not know the particulars of the TIF or not. Yes.
Set the TIF aside.
Yes.
Sorry I ever brought it up. I mean, we don't get
Yes.
many new housing starts in Evanston of this magnitude. We don't get many new housing starts like this in Evanston because, the land is.
You mean with the potential of having children involved?
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Because there are plenty of condominium developments that are much more dense.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
With ones that have home ownership that are likely to attract families.
Well, yes. And they will pay property tax and.
They will, yeah.
Yes, and they will, and.
State more money,
Yes.
state
Yes.
accounts.
So.
Anyway, just wanted to put that out there.
All right. Well, so have we done all of the, are we all done or one more? One more standard? Someone's saying there's another standard.
One more. Can you summarize them?
Yeah, I don't know how to summarize them. If you know them, you can summarize them. So plan development, standard guidelines for plan developments in District I-1 district.
That should say MXE.
MXE district, all right? So I thought we already went through that. Plan developments incorporating residential uses of a minimum of 45% of the total gross area of the plan development shall be devoted to usable open space. Is that met?
Yes, it is.
Okay. For development incorporating manufacturing uses, so that is not applicable. For boundaries of the plan development not immediately abutting dedicated improved public street, there shall be provided transitional landscape of at least 5% of the average depth. I believe that the landscaping is met on Custer.
On Custer, yes. There is a site development allowance requested for a landscape buffer around the other boundary lines of the property.
All right. We're on 4, I believe. Walkways developed for a planned development shall form a logical, safe, and convenient system for pedestrian access to all project facilities on off-site destinations likely to attract substantial pedestrian traffic, and shall not be used by other automotive traffic. So I believe that that's clear with the alternating fronts and backs. The location, construction, and operation of parking, loading areas, service areas shall be designed to avoid adverse effects on residential uses within or adjoining the development, where possible, provide additional parking beyond that required for the planned development and service in the downtown district in which it is located. So this is not downtown, so this is not applicable, or, I mean.
It's just referring to that particular plan, so that one phrase could be omitted and that one would actually matter, essentially.
So it's applicable universally, not just downtown. So I believe that it's providing additional parking for street parking as the meter parking and the residential parking is adequate. Principal vehicular access points shall be designed to permit smooth traffic flow with controlled turning movements and minimum hazards to the vehicle and pedestrian traffic. If planned development employs local streets within the development, said streets shall not be connected with streets outside the development. So I believe they have submitted and worked with the fire department and provided turning templates showing that traffic is adequately handled. The planned development shall provide, if possible, for underground installation of utilities. They are proposing that along the alley. For every planned development, there shall be provided a market feasibility statement. Now, was that provided in the packet? Did I miss it?
It was in the full plan development binder submittal.
Okay, all right. For every plan development, there shall be provided traffic circulation impact study, and that was provided. Anything more? Are we good? All right, great. All right, so that being said, does anyone, again, we have a choice of either dividing this into recommendations, divided or joined. So if everyone like to see it, maybe a straw poll of who would like to treat these separately of the commissioners, or who feels we should vote and then make a motion on one. So, yeah, for the map amendment would be separate from the recommendations on the site considerations and the plan development. So separate. Who thinks separate? And together. Oh, together. So yeah. So we're at 3-3. So
I think you could separate them if there's anyone that did want to vote differently on the two. It'd be best to have them as separate motions.
Yeah. So does anyone feel that they're going to have a different vote? No one does. So I think why don't we try to make a motion on the entire, both a recommendation for the redistricting and the plan development allowances. Yep.
I don't know how this works in terms of our purview, but when in our comments we made a few suggestions, but that's not what we're voting on, right? We're not. I mean, we're not. That does that count at all in this? It's either just a yes or no, and that's it.
So we can. So you can make a motion to either deny as is, approve as is, or approve with comments that or amendments to the as presented document. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
And as noted, there are suggested conditions of approval in the staff report, and then any additional conditions that the commission puts forward would also be put into the ordinance that would proceed to City Council.
So is there anything that one of the commissioners would like to add to the conditions recommended? Commissioner Goddard.
Yes, I would like to suggest that I like the recommendation of taking out 1 or 2 parking spaces along, I'm so tired, I can't even think, Main Street,
Yes.
to enhance the sightlines. I would like to make that part of our motion.
Can you explain that?
Yes, there was a recommendation made by the traffic consultant that 2 of the spaces on the north side
I see. I got it.
be removed to increase the visibility of right turning cars and left turning cars.
I guess I didn't make
comment
this.
on
Sorry, I didn't make the suggestion, but I do think that, in deference to the comments made by the neighbors, that I think I personally think the scale is okay, but I think there could be some improvements to the facade to make it a little friendlier to and a little more compatible with the facades of the other units or the other buildings, houses on the street. I understand why there's so few windows on that, and it has to do with the plan. I get it. But maybe there's other things that can be done to make those blank areas look a little more friendly. So I think that would help the project immensely.
Does anyone like to make a motion with one way or another?
I move that we accept, or that we recommend approval of the, I can't even think tonight, the change in zoning requested and the site development allowances requested, and additionally add the standards that the staff has recommended, and take out 2 places on Main Street.
Is there a second?
Can I add my suggestion to that motion?
Well, I don't know. I mean, an architectural change is a whole big change. I'm not sure we haven't even discussed that. That's a major change.
It is, but it's inherent in the development. When you look at the development, you're looking at the design of the development.
But isn't that design and review commission's job?
We've had this discussion before. I think that I'm also trying to respond to the concerns of the neighbors in terms of the scale and the how it fits into the neighborhood, and I think this would be it would help a lot in terms of that. So I don't know, I can't tell you whether it's in our purview or not, but someone could tell me that.
You can add a condition that the developer continue to work with staff on facade
All right,
improvements.
I would like to add that condition.
Along Custer.
All right. I will accept that.
You'll accept that. Is there a second? All right. So, as I understand it, there's a motion that's been moved and seconded to approve the development as a redistricting from MXU to MXE, and to allow the site development allowances, providing the conditions reflected in the report by staff, with the additional recommendations of eliminating 2 parking spaces on Main Street on the northwest corner of Main and Custer, as well as another condition that the developer continues to work with staff on enhancing the elevations of the appearance of the development. So that's been moved and seconded. So can we have a vote, please? Roll call.
Right. Commissioner Picozzi?
Yes.
Commissioner Halleck?
Yes.
Commissioner Goddard?
Aye.
Commissioner Dubin?
Yes.
Commissioner Draper?
Yes.
And Chair Lewis?
Yes.
It is unanimous.
Okay. So the motion has been, your petition has been recommended for approval, and so, all right, thank you. That will end the proceedings for that. So we have, yeah, so we have one more item. Can I ask staff? Can I ask staff what the urgency is for the next? George.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The text amendments that proposed deals with several uses within the Central Street Overlay District. One of them is more pressing than others. There's an applicant that's applied for a special use permit to operate a banquet facility, which is currently not a special use in the active ground floor uses. So that's the reason that this is going forward. That item's already been noticed for the zoning board.
The banquet hall has already been noticed.
That's correct.
All right, and so is there, I know Ms. Jones has asked availability for a special meeting. Is it urgent that a special meeting be held prior to the next meeting, the next regularly scheduled meeting, in order to address this issue?
The timing, if we're not to make a recommendation tonight on it, it would delay the application for the special use.
I think we can do it quickly myself.
Yeah, staff, I can go through the staff recommendations fairly quickly.
So, all right, so let's rock and roll on this. The last item on the agenda is 19 PLND 0010 for a text amendment for ground floor uses in the Central Overlay District. Staff, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. The Central Street Overlay District was established in 2007. Central Street Master Plan was conducted in 2007, and the Overlay District implemented in 2008. There are a number of goals that are shown here. The ones that are most relevant to active ground floor uses are B, C, and D, having to do with the uses and their location. Within the overlay, there's 7 sub-areas that will be shown on the following slides for maps. The ones that are being impacted are the sub-areas that have commercial zoning, so B1A, C2, and O1 along Central Street. You can see on this map the eastern portion of the overlay district, running from just west of Evanston Hospital and Ridgeon Avenue, and it goes all the way out to the end of Central Street at Crawford and Grosse Pointe. The sub-areas are listed, a little more difficult to make out on this map, but sub-area 3 is the O1 district, the office district areas. The remaining districts outside of Green Bay Road are the other commercial districts going forward. So there's a list of, within each district, there's underlying zoning, there's special uses and permitted uses. Additionally, there is this table of active ground floor uses that is supplemental to those underlying zoning districts. This was last updated in 2014 by a text amendment to the Plan Commission, along with other regulations in the Central Street Overlay District. So staff this evening is proposing changes to only the following uses within that sub-area. All the changes that are being proposed would be special uses within each of these as indicated on the table. So any of these changes would need to go through a special use process. There still would be additional scrutiny on a case-by-case basis before DAPR, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the City Council, with the exception of brew pub. That's a use, as you may recall, that was just introduced within the last year by the Plan Commission and City Council. A brew pub is most similar to a Type 1 restaurant. That's a primary portion of it. So that's the only use that's being proposed to be created as a permitted use within these districts. The other uses would be special uses. The banquet hall use was mentioned as being proposed. Additionally, religious institution, there's been interest and some support amongst the business association for relocation of a religious institution that's present on the within the district already. And the other changes are listed on this table, removing a couple that really don't apply to the table because they're above the ground level. Those are kind of the pinkish color there. A couple text cleanups in the white, and then the new uses in yellow, and more aligning the underlying zoning districts to the ones in blue. So those are the proposals there. Concludes a summary of the staff report. Additional information include the packet, and we're available for questions. Thank you.
So are there any questions from the commissioners? Okay, there, just for the record, there is no public present, so, I just want to clarify that this is just, or ask, generally, this is more to bring in line the existing body of the text with this chart.
That's correct. The uses are covered within the underlying zoning districts, but are not listed on the table, most of these here. So this would just list them on the table, and again, almost all of them as special uses. So they would still have to go through a process and to determine their compatibility at the particular location.
And this is limited to the ground floor uses only.
That's correct. That's what this table covers.
Okay. So,
and for this, there is only one set of standards, 4 standards within amendments.
So I would give you the honor of reading the standards or summarizing them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So that the first has to do with compatibility with the comprehensive plan. The second standard with the overall character of development in the immediate vicinity subject property, and that is the corridor in this sense.
And the intent is to create active ground floor uses that provide foot traffic, et cetera. So it helps to maintain that. Yes. Okay.
Yes. And whether there would be an adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties. And then finally, the adequacy of the public facilities and services.
And that's really not applicable to the text amendment, I would imagine. So since there's no specific use, so I believe it meets the standards for amendments. So any discussion? Is there a motion that any of the commissioners would like to make? Seconded by Pagozzi. All right. Why don't we have a vote?
Commissioner Pagozzi? Yes. Commissioner Hallett? Commissioner Goddard?
Aye.
Commissioner Dubin?
Yes.
Commissioner Draper? Yes. Chair Lewis?
Yes.
It is unanimous.
All right. Very good. So, with that, since there is no public, for public comment, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Right, I think Pagozzi moved and Dubin second. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? All right. Jesus.